The torrential rain cascaded down onto the crimson battlefield, where a teenager knelt, weakened, in the pouring rain. At his feet lay countless corpses of comrades and enemies alike. From their lifeless bodies, one could deduce that not long ago, this place witnessed a horrific massacre. The young man now slowly cast his eyes around. The chaotic heap of corpses before him would drive anyone who saw it into madness, yet this youth remained remarkably calm as he surveyed his own accomplishments. The satisfaction in his heart gradually gave way to feelings of weariness and disgust. Suddenly, at this moment, a sound echoed from somewhere, startling him. That sound seemed to reproach someone for their careless actions. It was that very carelessness that allowed this young man to still be alive. The young man looked down beneath his feet with an unbelieving gaze, astonished that the recent battle hadn't wiped out the opposing force. This figure was a giant, several times larger than an average person, with a demeanor resembling that of a demon. Legend referred to him as the giant, a Hayute, who appeared in the Empire 20 days ago, causing unrestrained chaos. The one currently pinned beneath the youth's feet is the last of the trio of giants. He cursed vehemently, as half of the Empire had turned into a graveyard because of this creature. Why haven't you died yet? The giant beneath the youth's feet suddenly mumbled something. Don't worry, it won't be long now, a Hayute will soon return to your side. The young man stared at it with cold determination, calmly responding, that's right, your companions who fell before you are waiting for you. The giant suddenly muttered something, don't worry, it won't be long now, a Hayute will soon return to your side. The young man, with a cold and stoic gaze, calmly replied, all right, your companions who fell before you are waiting for you. The giant appeared surprised upon hearing the term, companions. The youth explained, two names come with you. One turned into a giant hound, bound by long scorching chains. And the other name was permanently sealed by an old man named Lorehen. At this point, the young man couldn't contain his excitement and mocked him, you understand now, right, you foolish creature. The giant confronted him, not hiding the truth, humanity is powerful, those children, for the sake of Tin too, share a common perception. I know that those enemies have all been buried along with him, and this means that powerful beings like you no longer exist. The young man responded, I'm still alive and kicking here, what are you talking about? Just as he was about to thrust his weapon into the giant's eyes, the giant said, don't speak too soon, I know your time is running out. I'm quite amused, but if you had recognized your skills early on and focused on honing them, you could have become a significant obstacle to our aspirations. These words triggered a dark memory in the young man. After a while, he could respond calmly, that's right, even without you, I know my life is miserable, so let it end in silence. The giant's voice remained unyielding in the face of the young man's challenge, you are a great human, you have every right to be proud. But in the end, your world was soon submerged and vanished under the starlight, the giant's voice gradually replaced by the young man's labored breath. With his last ounce of strength, he swung the weapon forcefully down. That strike made the opponent's head roll down to the ground. Even though he had killed him, the young man couldn't find any joy, he didn't know how to confront everything that had happened. Wave after wave of memories rolled back. Along with it, came the images before his eyes. An image from a time before the battle, when he was still a novice among the ranks, a lonely figure in the army. His life changed when comrades stepped into his world. People who accepted him, shared with him, and formed bonds. Life in the military went through joyful days. Everyone charged into numerous battlefields together. However, those beautiful memories ended when, before him now, lay the lifeless bodies of his comrades. Are you all here? You foolish idiots. Why did you all have to be so arrogant, fighting to the death? Thought if I'm strong, you'd all be strong too, huh? You should have known when to run, you foolish bunch. Why, how can the giants resist the strongest sword aura of the Empire? Why is it only my sword that can fend him off? If not for that, a mere foot soldier like me wouldn't have to be on the front lines, and you wouldn't have to die. Saying this, his eyes filled with despair. He had no idea what to do next, surrounded by a dark and gloomy atmosphere. But a voice that appeared now brought light to him. Is anyone there? I'm injured and can't move. The bewildered young man searched for the origin of the sound. This voice. Is she still alive? The voice continued. Is anyone there? Encouraged, the young man struggled to stand up. Hope crept into his heart. She is still alive. Trembling, he gritted his teeth and moved towards her. Not long after, he finally saw the other person. The moment he truly saw her, still breathing, the young man was overjoyed. So, the commander is still alive. However, upon seeing the wounds on her body, the young man was horrified. The brave and beautiful girl was looking at him with an arm completely lost. This person was none other. After a while, the young man could finally calm the horror in his heart. He showed a genuine smile and teased her. What happened to our talented leader like this? The commander wasn't angered by his words. Her attitude remained entirely natural. After all, you're just a private. You're not that strong yourself. More importantly, Ahayute, are they dead, Ronan? After hearing her question, he admitted that he was the one who killed him, and the opponent's body is nearby. Adishan also paused after hearing this information. Although his words were calm, she couldn't hold back her tears. He's gone. Thank you so much, Private Ronan. Faced with her words, Ronan didn't know how to respond. He turned to tease, if you're so grateful to me, can you fulfill one of my requests? Adishan, curious about his request, asked what it was. Ronan continued, handling the bodies of those soldiers from Trungthan, usually according to regulations, their bodies will be burned or discarded, but this time, could you order a more respectful handling of their remains? Adishan, teasing him in return, said, I'm not sure about that, now I'm even more damaged than you, so you better go take care of them yourself, it might be better. Ronan, wanting to explain, was interrupted by a violent coughing fit. His hands stained with blood from the coughing fit. Ronan didn't panic. Instead, he considered it evidence that he was more damaged than Adishan. He spoke calmly, saying that he could die at any moment. Along with that calmness was regret for the days when he only wandered around, not accomplishing much. Now, he was about to descend into the abyss. Adishan listened silently to his lament. As if thinking of something, she asked him what he would want to do if he survived. This question made Ronan burst into laughter. A young, ambitious teenager like him would undoubtedly have many things he wanted to do. However, at the moment, the only thing he could think of was. He just didn't know what it felt like to attend the academy, and Adishan certainly didn't expect this to be his answer. The reason for Ronan's wish came from the words spoken by the giant before. But above all, there was one thing more important that drove him. The last wish of his sister, she wanted him to go to school. At this point, Ronan could only shake his head because that wish could no longer be fulfilled. In just a few minutes, he might be reunited with his family. Seeing him in despair, Adishan tried to console him. When the rain stops, the rescue team will start searching. In response, he sighed deeply, saying that he already told her he was missing. Why did she keep talking? Useless things like that, he said, and at this point, his eyes became melancholic, perhaps because he had no way back or because his purpose for living was no more. Suddenly, the pouring rain on the battlefield stopped, and both were startled. The rain stopped. The first storm has ceased. Before they could comprehend, the ground suddenly shook violently. Both were perplexed, not knowing the cause. The answer came right after. Giant figures appeared in the sky, not just one or two, but countless giants. Their massive bodies, along with the sheer number of them, covered the entire sky. What is happening? Where did they come from? And why are there so many of them? A sense of desperation and helplessness grew stronger. Adishan's body trembled. She couldn't believe the battle was far from over. She had failed 3 times already. At this moment, she clung to one last hope, beyond which she knew nothing. All her current thoughts were abruptly interrupted by Ronan. The commander. What happened to her? You need to control your emotions. Hurry, use your extrasensory powers or whatever to throw me up there. I'll deal with them while you stay on the ground, out of their reach. Then, as Adishan remained motionless, Ronan shouted, don't tell me you're not planning to defeat them. Adishan was utterly surprised by his words. In this situation, he still intended to fight. Ronan had no intention of giving up. He couldn't sit and wait for death. Even if he had to die, he would bring down the wings of these monstrous creatures. His determination startled Adishan, realizing that even in this dire situation, he was not ready to give up. Indeed, he's just like that. If it weren't for him, we wouldn't have come this far. With him, there might be hope for our journey. Adishan regained her determination and approached Ronan, calling his name with a perplexed expression. Ronan thought she might advise him to give up, so he braced himself for discomfort. However, before any criticism was spoken, Ronan found Adishan's eyes close to his, and the atmosphere shifted. This esteemed commander, under the current circumstances, was almost like being on the verge of kissing him. Ronan's thoughts buzzed like bees, and he didn't know what to do other than stiffen up. In this moment, a gem from Adishan's mouth shifted to Ronan. The gem had just flown out when Adishan also collapsed. Ronan, anxious, asked her, what did you finally give me? Adishan explained something, and finally, she whispered into his ear, you need to hone your skills. I'm glad you want to do that too. Ronan completely couldn't understand. Instead, he appeared annoyed. In this situation, she was saying incomprehensible things. Adishan suddenly called his name. She hoped that if they could meet again, he would advise her not to do foolish things and just be content working as a tailor. She had done many things before, but she had never tried that. Hearing her heartfelt words, Ronan could only stand there, unable to react in time. The giant in the sky didn't give them a chance to talk. In his hand, an energy sphere appeared. That lethal energy thing is getting closer and closer to Ronan, its destructive force sweeping across the entire battlefield. Ronan jerks awake and opens his eyes. He recalls the destructive light he was worried about and looks around for Adishan. However, before him now is a lush green meadow. A place without any signs of death, without any giants. The tranquility reaches the point where Ronan can see children playing together. This familiar sight stirs emotions in Ronan. Is it possible that he has returned to his old hometown, Nim Button? The truth before my eyes made Ronan laugh. He didn't think Adishan's words were true. He remembered the time she put the pearl in his mouth. It was a singular gem. When he asked what that thing was, Adishan said it was a gem that could turn back time. That's why a former seamstress like her was able to rise to the position of commander-in-chief. However, even though this gem allows her to reverse time 4 times, she had already used it 3 times. And this is the last chance. She gave this chance to Ronan. The one with the power to kill giants. She believes he will be the key factor in preventing the destruction of this world. She said he needed to practice his skills, and was glad that he wanted to do the same. Perhaps she remembered his wish to go to the academy and thought so, but Ronan himself considered it just nonsense. Adishan reminded him that if he wanted to study, he should go to Filon Academy, where there were excellent people, so it would definitely be useful to him. Besides this, she also hoped he could help her. If the 2 of them could meet again. She hopes he can tell her not to do anything foolish and just be a tailor. She has done many things but has never redone anything to the end. Ronan is extremely confused. He can't believe he can go back to the past, even can't believe he can do it himself. However, when he realizes this is the past, a sense of joy emerges. If he returns for real, just a little more, he can repeat his sister. In a hurry to return, he suddenly stops. Not far away is a group of wicked people. They, however, hang a child upside down in midair. They still look just like they did in the past, in his memories, and he decides to leave. But suddenly he realizes something is not right. The child is not hanging by a rope, but by magic. Such a valuable person is rare on the battlefield, yet here they are in this rural area. At this moment, he sees the magic controller, a person with pink hair. He is extremely frightened to the point of shivering. They plan to continue like this until when? If this continues, something will happen to that hanging child. The hanging kid begs in fear, please stop. I really don't have money. My mom's medicine is expensive this month, yet the bully has no intention of letting go. He sneers, why should I worry about your mother's health? If you are a filial son, then you should earn more money, that's when he said, and he waved his arm vigorously. Then he continuously slapped the face of the boy. The surrounding crowd had no intention of intervening. They seemed even more excited by this act of violence. The leader suddenly turned and called the teenager performing magic. This guy still doesn't understand. Pull him up onto the tree. Before his suggestion, the teenager kept shaking his head, I can't do it. If I pull him up higher and accidentally slip my hand, won't you be the one hanging him? He shut up and quickly pulled him up, Asel. Before you get hanged together with it. Hearing that, the teenager is scared. He deeply regretted it, even doubting whether he was wrong to learn magic. He just wanted to show everyone that he was good at something. He wanted to stop his evil actions, but he felt very scared. But his reason said, he had to say it. After a moment of mental preparation, he hesitantly said, please. Please stop. Before he could finish his words, a stick hit him hard in the back. Ronan's attack also caused that magic to be cut off. He scolded, stop it, you bastard, kill it now. The bindings on the boy's legs disappeared. He fell backwards to the ground. Seeing that someone dared to interrupt him, the leader was extremely upset. He turned to yell at Asel, what are you doing? When he said stop, did you stop? Did you think I was joking with you or something? His aggressive appearance scared Asel and kept backing away. I didn't mean it. But now Ronan stood in front of him and reassured him, Asel, don't worry about that trash. And talk to me. Your words surprised the other person. Seeing Ronan standing up to talk to the teenager who blocked his way, the leader was extremely angry, you bastard, how dare you do that? Ronan paid no attention to him and continued to ask Asel, where did you learn that teleportation magic? He hesitantly answered, I learned it in a magic book I bought from a street stall. Ronan was surprised. He didn't expect that from a cheap spell book, he could be so good. He needed to observe more to confirm his talent, but compared to those giants, this ability was still nothing. His thoughts were interrupted by the sound of a sword being drawn behind him. The leader was extremely angry. Having Ronan ignore him and interrupt his good deeds made him explode. It seems like since I intentionally lost to you, you've become arrogant. But today I will correct you. After saying that, he picked up his sword and rushed up to attack Ronan. Looking at the sword in his hand made Ronan a bit surprised, because this thing was a real sword, a very difficult weapon to get. His fighting posture is not suitable for this sword, but his strength is quite strong so he can dominate around here. But it was nothing to him. Right after that he easily dodged his sword. The leader couldn't believe it. He didn't expect that Ronan could avoid it so easily. That only Ronan himself understands best. Even though his body is younger, there are still things that are the same as before, things that were attached to his body when he was still a disciplined soldier. That is fighting intuition. Failing to hit Ronan, the leader forced a smile. It was just a fluke. I intend to make you unable to lift a spoon for the rest of your life. Ronan calmly nodded in response to his words. Is that right? Today I'm really lucky, even though I've been unlucky all my life. He thought he was afraid of him, so he boasted even more. He raised his voice and said, in that case, you kneel down and beg. Then I will spare your life. Of course, you will only have one hand left. Ronan's response was fake fear. He didn't seem to pay attention to what he said until. This guy laughed when he killed you. He will treat your sister very well. When talking about that person, Ronan's emotions suddenly dropped. The leader still didn't notice but laughed even harder. Every time I see her, I think that her butt is really tight. Ronan did not let him continue to say disgusting words. He shook the wooden stick in his hand. This blow caused one of the opponent's ears to be severed. The loose ear fell to the ground. The leader trembled and dropped the sword in his hand. He screamed in pain. His accomplices were all stunned in disbelief. Ronan moved slowly towards him. His figure at this moment is no different from that of death. The blue veins on his face appeared to show anger, and he even had the intention of killing him. The leader's subordinates froze at the image before their eyes. They couldn't believe Ronan would cut off his ear with just a wooden stick. At this time, Ronan also noticed them. He turned to call, "Hey you bastards, it's fun to watch. If you don't want to be like this bastard, then join hands and get out of the cage." As he spoke, he kicked down hard on the person under his feet as if to increase the threat. He did not forget to instruct him to return the money they had just robbed and compensate them for their mental losses. The group obviously obediently complied. They promised to return it. As soon as he received the money, Ronan immediately threw it to the bullied young man, his action surprising him. "You give it all to me, this is more than the money they robbed me." Ronan didn't pay much attention and shook the sword in his hand. "It's okay, I just need it. Don't worry about their revenge or anything, they don't have the guts to hang around here anymore." Hearing that, the young man was happy. He repeatedly bowed his head to thank Ronan. He waved his hand. "Nothing, just go home." Suddenly Asel hesitantly interrupted their conversation. Both of them looked at him with puzzled eyes. After a long while, Asel was able to say every word in her heart. "I'm sorry. I know I shouldn't do that. Even if he threatens me. But I'm so scared, so I can't do anything. It's all my fault. I'm truly sorry." The teenager did not blame him, but instead smiled teasingly. "Asel, you are so crybaby again. When he brought you here. When I saw you I thought. You must be in the same situation as me. So Asel, don't blame yourself like that. This is not your fault. But I still accept your heart." Then the twist in Asel's heart was completely resolved. The teenager also took the money and left. Now only Ronan and Asel were left standing there. He turned his eyes to evaluate the other person. "I can see that he is actually a good person, and his actions just now were forced. As you can see, he's not that bad." Thinking about it, he raised his hand to lightly hit the other person. "Hey, do you remember that I said I had something to discuss with you?" Asel was startled to remember that there was indeed something like this earlier. Seeing that he had agreed, Ronan immediately promised him to meet again here 4 days later. Asel had absolutely no idea what his purpose was, nor did he understand why he said 4 more days. As soon as he asked why, he explained, "I have work now, see you later, when the moon rises. Of course, if you don't come, you know the consequences." His threat has indeed worked. Asel can only agree to listen. His goal was achieved. Ronan immediately left. Before leaving, he did not forget to warn him that if he was late, he would die. Asel was stunned and looked at his figure. A long while later, Ronan stood in front of his house, confused. With a mixed bouquet of flowers in his hand, he looked like an immature teenager expressing his feelings for the first time. He remembered that she really liked flowers, so every time he saw flowers on the road, he picked them. But now that he has the flowers, he's embarrassed and doesn't dare enter the house. After wondering for a while, he blames himself for doing something stupid and should have thrown them all away. Suddenly someone came out of the house, along with a gentle voice. She wondered who was outside. "So it's you, Ronan. Are you back?" All of Ronan's thoughts at this moment completely stopped. "When I was in the army, I always thought I didn't know what to say when I saw her again, so I apologized for leaving without saying a word or said I missed her very much. I always thought about today's meeting." Yet that was all the disciplined soldier Ronan could utter. The older sister was happy to see him return. Ronan's eyes couldn't leave her. "All I can say right now is, you're home." At the dinner table, Irel's voice kept ringing. She didn't think she could live until that day. Was given flowers by his cold brother. This made her even more excited. Ronan was extremely confused, interspersed with a bit of accomplishment at seeing her so happy. At this time, Iril asked again, "My lovely brother, is this enough to fill me up? Please bring me more stew." Ronan quickly waved his hand and replied, "Thank you, but that's enough. But I have a question to ask. How old are you this year?" The question makes Iril angry. "Oh my god, Ronan, you're 22, but why do you ask that?" Ronan could only use the excuse that he suddenly forgot, which immediately made Iril impatient. How could he forget his sister's age? "Is your head injured, or do you have a fever?" Ronan, while responding to her series of questions, he also estimated that his sister is currently 22 years old. Which means there are 10 more years until those giants arrive. Suddenly there was a warm hand on his forehead. Just because of asking about his age, she thought he had a fever. She was still the same as in Ronan's memories. Someone who is always smiling, and also warm. I hope this moment will last forever. But in 10 more years, to protect this world and Iril, you must train. While Iril still didn't understand his attitude, Ronan said the problem in her heart, "I have something to tell you. I plan to join the academy." Iril was extremely surprised by his decision. Then she appeared excited. "Say it again, are you telling the truth?" Even though it's hard to understand, Ronan still nodded, seeing that made Iril even happier. 7 Every time she mentioned going to the academy, he wouldn't listen, but this time now he proactively mentioned it again. As if afraid that Ronan would change his mind, Iril immediately began preparations. As she packed her things, she said, "I knew this day would come. You're very smart, so I'm sure you'll be good at everything you want." Looking at her things thrown everywhere, Ronan said, "Thank you." After rummaging around for a while, Iril took out a large jar. According to her words, this was a surprise gift she gave him. What was in the jar was the money she had secretly saved. "This money is to pay for Ronan's education. The teachers care so much for me." Ronan is extremely touched, but he still has to try to express his feelings. "Even though I'm very grateful, I want you to spend this money." "This is not enough." Hearing you say that, Iril was startled. For a normal school, this amount of money is completely enough. Besides, this amount of money looks like that, but it's a lot. Ronan could only explain, "Royal School, Filon Academy." Iril's confidence slowly receded. Instead there was a sound of surprise. No one is unaware, the Filon Imperial Academy is the premier vanguard education institution across the entire empire. With renowned professors from across the continent and an immense endowment from the major noble families of the empire, it is a place that offers students the best educational opportunities. It holds enough prestige to be called a factory that produces heroes. Its reputation is immense, being the birthplace of the great General Addition. Master swordsmen like Shile Effan, notorious criminals, and even ice sorcerers have emerged from there, among many others. Those from Filon proved quite useful during the war, useful to the extent that one can comprehend why the Grand General emphasized it, and Ronan can understand why General Addition mentioned it for him. However, with such high entry standards, coupled with an enormous fee, its current fame has become a concern for Ronan. But when he thinks about Iril's absolute trust in him, his determination rises even higher. He stops in his tracks and declares decisively, "I will show her the results." Having said that, he looks ahead at the figure in front of him and adds, "By the way, I didn't know you would be here earlier." Mazel, emerging hesitantly from the shadows of the tree, corrects his words, "Not Mazel, it's Asel. And besides, you said you wouldn't let me off if I didn't come." So Ronan smiles at him and speaks up, "Forget about that, will you? Tonight, we will be quite busy. And there are a few things I need to check about you." Saying this, he throws his backpack over his shoulder. Asel startles at his words, "A test? You just said something strange." Ronan calmly remarks, "Nothing too serious, just a little test." He adds, "Use your psychic abilities on me, Asel. Raise me to the highest with your abilities, let's see what you've got." Seeing him take the initiative to make himself the subject of the experiment, Asel is extremely surprised, feeling confused about what to do. Asel doesn't understand why Ronan would suggest something potentially dangerous, but Ronan simply says, "It's not that dangerous, just do as I said, for starters. I won't die, so don't be afraid, just follow my instructions," Ronan says determinedly, and Asel can only comply with his request. "You slowly use your magic," Ronan instructs. Each strand of magical energy forms into a magical hand, then advances towards Ronan. Ronan seems to sense an intangible presence reaching towards him. It lifts Ronan off the ground. This sensation fills him with growing hope. Although there are still shortcomings in terms of height and balance, this sensation is reminiscent of when he fought that giant. In the battle with a Hyute, it was what enabled him to fight on equal terms with that wretched individual. It was the power of psychic strength. Psychic strength is a rare ability, and it is also considered rare among the ranks of wizards. This implies Asel will become one of the most crucial factors to provide support in the battle against a Hyute. This beginning is indeed not bad. Not long after, Asel began to tremble, finding it increasingly difficult to maintain control. Just as he's about to end the magic, Ronan stops him, requesting him to hold on a little longer to check something. That is Ronan intending to descend himself, which truly confuses Asel. As of now, he's the one controlling the magic, and if he doesn't release it, Ronan would find it difficult to come down. Ronan answers these questions with the action of unsheathing his sword. He swings his sword down forcefully towards the source of the psychic energy supporting him. Asel stands frozen in place, unable to believe Ronan's actions. Just now, I cut off the mana stream you created. You want an explanation for this action, but he simply shakes his head. Nothing really, just a somersault move I've known how to do since forever. Asel still wants a detailed explanation, but Ronan taps his head because, in reality, he doesn't know why either. However, Ronan considers this as a kind of homework, something to figure out and understand the nature of this skill. The reason his sword can affect that giant, perhaps if he solves this question, he will know why. But this is not urgent, there are other matters that need his attention now. He picks up his backpack and says, "Anyway, Asel, you passed. Before the moon completely disappears, we need to take care of some things," he says, then tosses his backpack to Asel. Asel hesitates a bit, unsure about what needs to be done in this dark night. Ronan asserts, this could become the first chapter in Ronan's autobiography, the greatest book in the entire empire. On the way, Ronan explains the purpose of this journey, leaving Asel in awe after hearing it. Asel thinks he might have misheard, especially when the destination they are heading to is the Filon Academy, a place exclusive to the elite members of the empire. Even more unbelievably, he and Ronan are heading there. Ronan is annoyed by Asel's persistent disbelief. Ronan turns to ask, "So, you don't want to go?" Asel hurriedly replies, "No, that's not the issue. You have talent in martial arts, so you should be fine, but I don't know anything." Asel expresses his concerns. "And on top of that, I'm both cowardly and clumsy," Asel adds. Ronan immediately interrupts his self-deprecating words, "Hey, Asel. Do you want to keep living like this? With the talent you already possess, you're wasting it by being a joke for the world. Is that really the life you want? To be honest, you have a foolish way of thinking, you're timid and clumsy. You're like a crybaby, shedding tears for every reason, and you're afraid of failure." Each word from Ronan's mouth feels like a sharp intellect arrow aimed straight at Asel. Just as Asel is feeling disappointed in himself, Ronan says, "But that's okay because from now on, you can still change. However, the time that has passed cannot be regained. And one day, you will regret it. Speaking of this, it seems like you might be reflecting on yourself. You've also experienced regret like that, haven't you? Regret loomed over me in my previous life." After stabilizing his emotions, he asked Asel, "What do you think? Have you changed your mind?" Hearing this, Asel looked at him in astonishment. His words left her feeling extremely embarrassed. He didn't expect that Ronan had been concerned about someone like him all this time. Of course, Ronan had no idea how far his thoughts had traveled. He continued speaking, "I won't force you, as this is your life, so, if you want, you can return to that way of life." "Stop, I'm busy now." Just as he turned to leave, Asel exclaimed in panic, "Wait, Ronan, I want to change too. I will come to Filon with you, so tell me what I need to do." Ronan smiled as he saw his goal accomplished. Then he appeared serious and praised, "All right, this is the first time you've shown your masculinity, so, for Asel's great masculine debut, let's get started." Seeing Asel's agreement, he continued with a satisfied smile. At the cave in the woods, there was a campfire ahead. Asel startled, looking in that direction. Sweat beads formed on Asel's forehead with Ronan's first instructions. "This is the best opponent I've found, to bring out all of Asel's talents. It's a benevolent fairy spirit. Moreover, it's the leader of its kind." Ronan chuckled gleefully, patting Asel on the shoulder. For him, this was fantastic. However, his companion standing nearby had turned pale long ago. Ronan smiled and said, "Now, shall we begin?" Asel and Ronan were standing on the side, observing the lunar beasts. Both dared not make a sound, fearing that any noise would attract their attention and endanger them, risking their lives in the process. They had wrinkled, golden skin, and their bodies were distorted with long horns on their backs. Some of them had tangled hair, along with long, sharp claws, and they stood at a height similar to that of humans. However, the most noteworthy aspect here is their intense greed for wealth, gold, silver, and treasures. In essence, they are extremely excited, revealing sharp, dagger-like teeth. Their primary hobby is to roam around, ruthlessly slaughtering innocent villagers and looting all the possessions of merchants, leaving nothing behind. Finally, they would gather to celebrate their victories, indulging in a lively feast. They would come together, dancing and singing joyously as if they had achieved a great triumph. They would place everything into a box atop a pile of straw, then raise their hands in triumph. Typically, these lunar beasts would organize their celebrations at night to avoid drawing attention to themselves. Asel ran up, clutching Ronan's sleeve, and asked, "So, what's the reason we came here?" Ronan replied nonchalantly, He looked towards them with fascination as he observed the pile of gold, silver, and treasures, as that was precisely his objective. Asel looked at them anxiously, worried that both of them would be in danger. It was the first time he had witnessed such a terrifying and demonic scene. Suddenly, he asked, "But how do you know about that?" The young man nonchalantly brushed off the question and then pulled out his backpack, getting ready with the equipment. The young man excitedly draped an arm around the other's shoulders, causing him to blush as Ronan discussed the plan for him. Asel harbored some doubts about the success of this plan. Just the thought of both of them being captured sent shivers down his spine, and the idea of them ending up in the clutches of those creatures was terrifying enough. Just thinking about it was enough to send shivers down his spine, so Asel tried to stop Ronan from proceeding with the plan, fearing it would be like selling themselves to demons. "We should reconsider," he urged, as Ronan, annoyed, spoke sharply, "You're as timid as a rabbit." So, he immediately presented two options to Asel. If they wanted to enter the academy, they needed a significant amount of money, enough to cover tuition fees and sustain their lifestyle. The next crucial factor is the need for combat skills and personal strength to have a chance at stepping into the academy. The young man looked at Asel with a serious expression, stating a truth to wake him up. Ronan analyzed it thoroughly for Asel, emphasizing that there was only one way to win against those people. At this point, Ronan's eyes sparkled with the light of ambition because, naturally, the only way forward was to take risks and face life or death. Ronan, while looking at the group of monsters, chuckled sarcastically, as they were the perfect prey for his mission. So, he bombarded Asel with questions, who was now huddled up. "Did I say something wrong, or do you have a better idea?" Asel, shrinking back, could only shake his head. "I don't, but..." Ronan cut him off, saying, "Well, then let's just decide on this." The young man slapped his friend on the shoulder, signaling the start of the mission. So, Asel used his strength to pull out the entire pile of diamonds, gold, silver, and jewels, placing them into Ronan's pocket, including weapons and various other items. He had just completed the task, yet his heart was filled with anxiety and fear, breathing heavily and rapidly. The last items dropped included swords and pearl necklaces. Asel smirked, content with this pile of money. Now, with it, she wouldn't have to worry about starving to death. His eyes showed joy as he looked down at the money in his pocket, gently shaking it to feel its weight. The result of their spoils was 2 bags full of money. Ronan patted Asel's head, praising him for doing a great job. Initially, he himself didn't think Asel could be that good, so he was quite surprised when he saw his talent. Asel, now secretly happy, felt relieved that they had finished this mission. However, shortly after, his heart suddenly fell out. As for the young man, he was thinking about the possibility of continuing to exploit him and forcing him to work as an errand boy. The young man's eyes most clearly expressed that ambition and ideology, the eyes of an extremely greedy person. Ronan put the money in his pocket and coughed before speaking. "Okay, the bags are full of gold, let's go," he replied excitedly. "So, the job is over." Ronan nodded. "Well, there's nothing left for us to do." Ronan nodded. "Well, there's nothing left for us to do." That night, the moon was very bright, and the night scene was extremely peaceful. While everything was calm and quiet, 2 crazy guys appeared out of nowhere, running wildly through the forest, cursing as they went. Damn it, the 2 were chasing a black bird ahead at a fast pace. Standing there, both were startled by the screams of the 2 strangers. Ronan cursed in bewilderment. What is it? What kind of crazy people are making noise in the middle of the night like this? The sudden noise abruptly awakened a moon monster. It grumbled a few times, looking at the treasure chest and muttered to itself, "Late at night, where is that noise coming from? Too late now." So, it was done. It realized that their money box had no coins left. It immediately let out a loud cry, calling its comrades, "Thief! Wake up, there's a thief!" They all quickly grabbed their weapons and discussed among themselves, trying to find out which scoundrel dared to steal their treasure. Suddenly, a noise from behind caught their attention. And that's how both unlucky individuals caught the attention of the moon monster beasts. So, this time, both of them would still have to run until they were vomiting blood. Ronan cursed in his head. "Oh, shit." They all rushed forward to attack like crazy. Asel hugged his pale face, extremely frightened. He sat down in fear. Only Ronan was calm enough to throw his bag of money aside, ready to fight. He sighed. It really couldn't be that easy. He trembled and asked if he had to throw the bag of money and run away. Of course, Ronan never agreed. The young man would be the one to properly defend against the robbery, raising his sword to fight. The demon beasts were rushing at lightning speed with ferocious expressions, their blood-red eyes clearly visible in the darkness. As soon as he saw them approaching, he shouted his name. Ronan, they're coming. They roared and charged fiercely. The young man was very calm, slowly drawing his sword, carefully analyzing the sword, and then continuing his calculations. The young man calculated in his head, I'll probably be able to make about 15 cuts. Ronan estimated how many opponents there were to choose the situation for the fight. The moon demon had pounced very close, just a bit away from him in its hand. Asel only dared to stand behind and scream his name, urging him to do something so that both of them wouldn't die. At the end of the day, the young man finally decided to attack them. The young man held the sword tightly. The three guys' heads were blown away in one go, so there was no need to say much. He looked bewildered at a sword art performance, their heads and blood mixed together and flying in the moonlit night sky, each head falling down. Ronan smiled happily, his eyes clearly showing intense and ferocious desire. The flock of red-eyed crows soared up, gazing at the scene of bloodshed with heads rolling in front of them, emitting eerie demonic cries. Ronan, with each sword strike, pierced the head of one crow, severing their heads in the blink of an eye, so 30 crows to him were just like mosquitoes. Asel, on the other hand, stood dazed like a golden deer, still trembling as she sat on the cold, desolate floor, lost in thought, seemingly impossible to comprehend. He couldn't believe the spectacle he had just witnessed. In an instant, Ronan swiftly dealt with them using a few sword strikes, quick and clean. An entire horde of goblins rushed in like ferocious tigers, charging all at once, yet the young man managed to handle them in the blink of an eye. Earlier, Ronan cracked a mischievous smile as if he had some devious idea. Indeed, the male protagonist swiftly moved at an incredible speed, slashing with his sharp sword directly into their bodies with remarkable agility. It only took him a few seconds to teleport, his eyes glowing a deep crimson like blood. Asel swallowed hard, a gulp of saliva sliding down her throat. The results speak for themselves. He had dealt with the entire group in less than 10 minutes. At this moment, Ronan called out to Asel, causing him to startle and respond hastily, "Oh, sorry, I didn't know." The young man just laughed, then slung his sword over his shoulder, without the need for an apology. His smile illuminated the night, and the two of them walked home together. Asel carried the bag on her shoulder with a weary look, burdened by its weight filled with money. Meanwhile, Ronan rubbed his sore shoulders, sighing, "So tired, thought we could travel comfortably together." He felt his shoulders quite sore after the recent brief battle. The young man even tried to move his arms more vigorously, eager to get home quickly and diligently strengthen his health, realizing his physical condition was currently weak. Asel involuntarily asked Ronan, "What was that horrifying scream just now?" He replied, "I don't know." Recalling the moment when someone told him to stop, both of them jolted, and suspicion welled up in Ronan's heart. Frustrated, he continued, "Those crazy lunatics, just wait, I'll make them pay a hefty price." At this moment, someone from behind suddenly wielded a sharp arrow, launching an attack from the rear. He shot the arrow swiftly, flying towards the front. Just at that moment, Asel turned around, sniffing the air with a sound that made him feel like he was in trouble. Luckily, Ronan was quick-witted enough to catch the arrow in time. Asel's face turned pale as she saw the arrow, realizing they were only a short distance apart. He inquired with suspicion, "Where did this thing suddenly come from?" Ronan looked around, inspecting everything. Suddenly, two other young men emerged, the same ones who had been shouting earlier, putting the two in a life-threatening situation. One of them spoke, "It's these brats." Hearing this, Ronan became furious, snapping the arrow in half, and retorted, "You little brats, your head's gonna roll." He scratched his head and apologized, "Sorry, kids." He explained, "We saw something suspicious in the distance, so we thought it might be a monster." While talking, he suddenly noticed a bag full of gold inside both of their bags. They glanced at it, immediately retracting their greedy gaze to conceal their true intentions, and continued smiling and chatting. Of course, Ronan could tell their intentions with just a glance. He scoffed, "Nonsense," as the two couldn't even hide the greed in their eyes anymore. The two suddenly froze as Ronan stared at them with a piercing gaze, demanding an explanation. His eyes, sharp as knives, seemed to pierce through the hearts of these individuals, making him extremely wary. Sensing his tension, they quickly grasped the situation. One of them immediately pretended to smile innocently and approached again. However, his other hand slowly drew a small dagger from his side. He intended to stab Ronan and snatch the money at the same time. At this point, the guy's face revealed nothing of the fact that he was possessed by a demonic entity. Ronan, with his skills, quickly seized the guy's hand, rendering his attempt useless. A straight punch from his chin upwards, the force and impact strong enough to send this guy's jaw flying. Caught off guard, he was left bleeding on the spot. Ronan smirked contemptuously at him, finding him truly despicable. Seeing his comrade injured, the remaining one intended to retaliate and attack for revenge. Asel, surprised by the turn of events, didn't want to sit still and do nothing. Immediately, she used her strength to stop him. His body became immobile seconds later. He squirmed uncomfortably. What's happening? I can't move. Ronan, seeing this, praised Asel. Wow, well done. With the help, dealing with this guy became even quicker. He swiftly wielded his sword, slashing without hesitation. The young man slashed a few times at his body in the blink of an eye. He remained alive, confused about what had happened. But seconds later, he understood as cuts appeared all over his body, from head to toe. The result was a single scream before he fell lifeless on the ground. Asel, frightened, startled at the sight of the guy collapsing. He sneered, dead already, and Ronan nodded. Indeed, why should I spare someone wanting to kill me? Ronan once again explained who they were. They were the most ruthless criminal group in the Empire, known as Calaboro. Naturally, Ronan had no tolerance for such individuals. As he explained, he swiftly ended the second one's life. Holding a sharp knife, he remarked, if not for me, your organs would have been harvested by now, and today would have been your secret funeral. Surprisingly, the bag they carried suddenly had a slightly loose string. It unexpectedly moved as if there was a living creature inside. Ronan exclaimed, why is it moving? Even Asel was startled. Both approached, attempting to fully open the bag and release whatever was inside. As they fully opened the bag, a pair of emerald green eyes, resembling those of a bird, stared directly at them. It flew up into the sky as soon as the bag was opened. It was an extraordinarily beautiful green bird. It's a bird, but initially, Ronan referred to it as a chicken. How can this be a chicken? Its feathers are green, and both of them are puzzled. The bird chirps cutely. Excited, Asel's eyes sparkle with joy. Ronan remarks, the first time I've seen a green bird. Ronan nods, unsure of it too. Suddenly, he notices something tied to its leg, a shackle. Is it Calaboro's shackle? Ronan explains that Calaboro's hunting shackles disrupt mana and limit the movement of the restrained. Ronan continues, I thought they rarely use it, maybe only for capturing mythical creatures. So, this green bird. It seems this bird is valuable. Suddenly, a magical array appears, and a faint voice emanates, go, ha. Finally connected, the bird makes human-like sounds, startling both of them. Asel, frightened, was about to run to hug Ronan but was stopped. The irritated young man retorted, you think it's speaking for real? It's magical communication. He looked down at the bag and pondered, it just flew out and was connected. It's possible that the bag is to block mana. Are you sure you are the owner of the bird? The young man asked. He nodded and replied, yes, I am Varan. Currently a graduate student on mystical creatures, I am the heir guard of Marpe. No matter how many times I tried to communicate, I couldn't. I was planning to report back here. Thank goodness. But I'm sorry, may I ask who you are? Ronan immediately grabbed Asel's collar who was about to run back and calmly replied, we are just people passing by. He reported, we had just fought poachers. The people who kidnapped the bird. And then, the young man can't say he single-handedly eliminated them in an instant. This story is too bloody to describe, the young man thought to himself and remained silent as a stone. I finished the sentence, we saved it. The other guy was startled when he heard this, what, poaching? He stroked his beard and said, I thought about it but I didn't expect something like this to happen. I owe you a lot. He confusedly replied, I don't know how to repay him. Asel looked at the blue bird with the same appearance and was indescribably confused. It's so adorable. I just said, there's no need, but how can I repay him? The bird is back for you. It seems like being tied up is very tiring. If you take this off, can it fly? Ronan means the handcuffs on his feet. He stammered, yeah, sure. Mongbird misses home very clearly, so if you let him go, I will not hesitate to pick up my sword and agree, then that's fine. The young man immediately cut off the cuffs in the blink of an eye, scaring the bird because it was so fast. The bird chirped continuously, bewildered. Go back to your father, Bluebird, and when he's done, he speaks nonchalantly. But in the bird's eyes now, your image is the most savior in the world, his halo is sparkling, don't worry your father anymore, just one sentence will make the bird touched. Then it immediately chirped and did strange actions. Ronan was stunned. The young man shouted in annoyance, he's sticking his butt in my face, what does that mean? He explained, well he wants you to pull out a feather before he flies away, it seems he wants to see you again. Ronan plucked a feather from its body as he said, after you pluck the bird's feathers, it can lead the host to you like a compass. Have you plucked your feathers yet? So if you come to the research center, remember to visit Marpe and me. I will repay you, that guy shouted loudly before the bird soared into the sky. The young man looked helpless, it flew really fast. Asel suddenly asked, what are you holding, Ronan? Ronan lowered his head and looked down, still bewildered, I just saw it now. The next second they were both bewildered, not understanding anything. Huh? What is this? A few days later they went to the merchant's place to trade, where there were horses and people exchanging goods. Big, strong men carried things up and down. The merchant held a magnifying glass, thoughtfully examined the sapphire in his hand, then praised the value and craftsmanship of this jewelry. What a precious item, I'll give you 20 gold coins, this person is the owner of the Carabel Company. The things you brought are all valuable. I'm really lucky today. He was very satisfied and laughed happily because he got a good deal. I was actually able to meet a customer like you. Until now, Ronan was happy and made friends. Finally, someone understood. Ronan stood behind him, looking sideways and worried. Remembering the scene where he had to curse with other merchants made him tired. The other merchants were all scammers. Just now he was cursing with one guy. This one costs 5 coins, mister. Are you blind, old man? That guy is so angry. What did you say? Asel had to pull to keep you from fighting. Calm down, Ronan. In the end, there was peace. He shook hands and agreed on the price, but fortunately I met a sharp-eyed businessman like him. It was truly worth the effort of going around all this time. Juon was also very pleased. I was very happy. Glad to hear you say that. Do you want to price anything else? The merchant asked. He felt in his pocket and said, well, is this okay? I don't intend to sell it. I'm just curious to see what it is. It's a beautiful egg with the color of the Milky Way. That night, some dreaming bird left this. He remembered that day. This egg has a very beautiful, smooth, shiny surface. At first, I thought it pooped on my hand, but it didn't. At that time, Ronan was very angry and shouted, does this chicken dare to repay me with this? To test it, he got angry and threw it straight into the cliff in front of him. It was really scary. And I knew it was very hard. Both of us immediately gasped and widened our eyes when we saw that the egg wasn't broken, but a broken stone. He was still confused. I didn't know what egg this was, but it was indeed the product of a mysterious creature. The merchant was now looking very attentively and observing carefully. It could be a golden treasure, he secretly hoped. The merchant suddenly asked with a serious face, this color and this texture. Not to mention, the young man was excited because he thought it would be a treasure. Horse manure, a sentence that hit Ronan like lightning, making him disillusioned. He sadly took it back. Of course it wasn't. The merchant scratched his head and smiled. Yeah, but I don't know what it is. I think it's a rare item. Why don't you give it to a professional place to appraise it? The young man looked solemn and thought, not understanding what this was. He sighed, I guess I should do that. Now that I'm curious, I probably won't sell it yet. And Asel on the side is still staring, so is that a hardened turd. Oh, do you have a book about Filon? Ronan asked further, what about Filon, the academy? Ronan nodded, yes, we were planning to take part in Filion's entrance exam but didn't know anything about it. The old man nodded, what a perfect timing for the entrance exam. He introduced, my daughter is also preparing for the entrance exam. Maybe she can help you too, she's probably coming soon. A girl walking from behind suddenly spoke up, what's going on, Dad? Who are they? The merchant cheerfully greeted me. He's back. A girl with blonde hair and extremely beautiful green eyes. This is my only daughter, Maria. The young man was startled when he saw her. Maria. It was her. He was a bit surprised. Juon happily talked to her daughter. Maria said hello to the two of you. These are some big people that Dad just made a deal with. Really? The daughter was surprised to hear what Dad said. These brats, she said in a rather skeptical tone. The father said grumpily, what kind of words is this brat? I'm sorry, he grew up in a merchant company so he speaks a bit rudely, he said shyly. Asel quickly replied politely, it's okay. But Ronan must have been, Before he could finish his sentence, he saw Ronan running towards the girl. He asked directly, hey, are you Maria? The girl politely replied, what's wrong? He continued to ask, does Maria have a Lotus middle name? She said yes and continued, but how did he know? Ronan pondered for a moment and found it very strange, she really resembled her. But the person I know, he remembers that person's appearance because the other person is male. So he called softly, hey, I'll ask you one more question, come here. Maria doesn't understand what this guy wants. Wait, what do you want to ask? She asked again. He whispered in her ear and said, so, do you have that down there? That bird, it's so annoying. Has anyone ever asked a girl like that? Maria was stunned and didn't understand what this crazy guy was thinking. I just heard it, what nonsense, she thought her ears were deaf. Yours, she thought blankly for a moment. Moreover, Ronan didn't even know when to stop, trying to say more. No matter how you look at it, it seems like she doesn't have that, the young man said and thought. Was talking about the part about, could it be that the old man had another child that he didn't know about? Then immediately something rushed towards the young man at lightning speed. Turns out it was a slap from Maria for asking promiscuous questions. Shut up, this psychopath, you're indescribably crazy. Instead of like the other guy who immediately jumped back, the young man was still preoccupied and noticed the slap, this very familiar feeling. It was that person. The young man was 100% certain that the person in front of him was the young man he knew, Count Maria Sen. A little introduction about Count Maria Sen. When I was a soldier discipline at a place called Armalan Marto was the person in charge of military equipment. With a great way of working and an open personality that can talk to anyone without hesitation, Maria is an admirable person. The young man recalls his previous life like that. But when talking about penises in the middle of the boys' conversation, Maria became unusually angry. And had an incomprehensible action, which was to slap me directly in the face. Before, I was always curious about the reason. If I could meet Maria again, I would like to ask about that reason, but that opportunity never came. Because Maria passed away before I asked, thinking about this, I also feel a bit regretful for the past. But I didn't expect to find you answering here, Count Maria. You, young Ronan was secretly happy because he had answered the question inside his heart. Are you a woman? The young man smiled with satisfaction because he knew the truth. The girl still didn't know what he had been through, so she angrily shouted, "What are you laughing at? Isn't that enough?" Maria was about to jump up and punch again, so I gave you one more blow. This time, Ronan was the one who angrily counterattacked and immediately hit her on the head, stopping this girl. The girl held her head in pain and had to stop. Ronan shouted back, "Seeing that I let you slap me and you will be able to attack." I let him slap me because I was wrong just now. Maria glared at this psychopath. The young man was about to speak, but I wouldn't. Before he could say it, Maria hit his chin with her head. "So what if I hit you a second time, crazy guy?" The two of them just started fighting each other. What am I going to do? Ronan is no match. Seriously, this crazy woman. Died. Both of them screamed in unison and then beat each other, while Asel and her old father stood there with their mouths open, not understanding what was going on. Seeing that the situation was too tense, the two had to run in to stop the fight. After a while, the two had to argue until late afternoon. Asel looked at both of them in bewilderment, with a huge question mark in her heart. What's going on with these two people? They just fought like you live or die. Maria scratched her head and said, "So these are the things left behind for you guys to use?" "Yes. Check to see if it's okay." Roy nodded, and Asel sat on the side confused. "But now?" The two continued to discuss, ignoring him. "If it's not okay, I'll go buy something else." They're in harmony with each other again. Asel looks at the two people in front of her like she's looking at aliens. Those two people are examining their swords very carefully. Maria picked up each sword and examined it. 3 swords and a wand. "Why did they give you 3 swords? Wouldn't it be difficult to carry them all?" Ronan replied, "Just in case, I'm a bit rough with the sword." She continued asking, "So how are they?" The young man replied, "Well, they're not bad, but this black iron sword is the best." She put away her sword and explained that black iron is quite sturdy, so it is an item that famous knights often hunt. She handed the sword back to the young man and said, "I don't know how roughly you use the sword, but this sword probably cannot be broken." The young man held it and thought, "So this is a black iron sword, is it? Was my favorite weapon in the past." Maria added, "But this wand has a very good magic stone attached to it, so I leave this for you." At this moment, she looked at Asel and asked, "Is this girl a magician?" Being asked suddenly, he explained to himself, "Yes, that's right." "What kind of magic do you use?" Asel mumbled as she rubbed her hands and replied, "Remote control magic." Just hearing this, Maria was startled and surprised. "Remote control? That's really impressive. If you do well, you can even receive a scholarship." Asel scratched her head shyly. "Really?" Maria continued to tell the young man, "So the problem now is what technique will you show in the practical test?" Ronan asked in surprise, "Technique? Don't you know?" She explained, "To get into Filon, you need to impress your professors and show them your technique in a practical exam. Of course, the theory test is also very difficult, but it cannot be compared to the practical test, so the point I want to say is that if you do well in the practical test, you will pass. In other words, if you can't prove your worth, then you should forget about entering the academy." Ronan sighed when he heard this. "What? A swordsman only needs to be good at swordsmanship, right?" "Oh man," the young man asked boredly after hearing this. "People often show off," she replied. "Most nobles show off their family's secret skills. Most of the other fighters and candidates showed off their personal mana fighting techniques," she said while thinking. At this point, the young man asked the question, "Wait, what mana?" "These young swordsmen can use mana even though they are not magicians." Maria looked at the young man strangely. "What are you talking about? If you are a future student of Filon, it is natural to be able to use them." "Okay, you can also sense mana. With that amount of mana he can use it in real combat. That is the most basic of the most basic things. The young man's face was bewildered when he heard these words. She looked at the young man in bewilderment, that expression of his. What does that mean? She trembled and stammered, don't tell me you don't know how to sense mana. The young man said something like lightning to Maria. What, isn't it similar to using aura? A true sentence that expressed her extreme despair. She covered her face and cried, oh my god, I'm talking to a guy like this and he's babbling about entering the Filon. She trembled and said speechless, aura and mana are similar. How can you say that? The young man, still unaware of the situation, scratched his head and said, oh my god, maybe I already know about it. Okay, you're seriously taking the matter seriously. She immediately stood up and asserted, there's no point in going out. The young man was bewildered and didn't understand what was going on. Why suddenly like that? Maria gathered all 3 swords and said, besides, can I borrow these short swords? I left mine at the blacksmith shop. Ronan still didn't understand why she was surprised by her request. What? The young man was angry and irritated. Wait a minute, why are you so natural like a fly? What if you damage my sword? Maria smiled confidently and walked away. Don't worry, because the match will end before that happens. Well, if that happens, I will pay you twice, no 3 times as much. Is that okay? Maria confidently suggested. Ronan was also at a loss for words. Oh my god. Maria urged, so stop babbling and follow me. I will give you special training. Mana is the source of natural power like air. It is a natural energy that exists anywhere in this world, but that does not mean everyone can use it. To use mana, we need to see and feel the mana inside us and be able to use and feel the mana. To enter this stage we need practice, natural talent, etc. A myriad of personal reasons can come into play, but it usually takes a year of practice to begin to feel it. And the future students of Filon all passed this stage after practicing their own mana techniques. Then they will be applied for Filon. Maria explained for a while and then asked, do you understand now? Don't tell me you can't even differentiate between aura and mana and yet you still want to enter Filon, Maria said reproachfully. That was meaningless. The two had just drawn their swords in preparation for a special training session. She continued to explain to the young man, okay, from his point of view, aura is also a type of mana, but the difference between them is like heaven and earth. The young man asked again, is there any difference? Maria analyzed that even famous geniuses have trained hard for at least 10 years, and they have shed blood endlessly to be able to realize their natural power, that is aura, she concluded. How's it going? Do you understand anything? The young man still had a calm face and replied innocently, well, not really. The young man thought back to the sources of energy and the people he had met. Sometimes he met them on the battlefield and they boasted that they were aura users and possessed extraordinary strength. They were really annoying, but in the end they weren't that scary. The young man used to hold a sword and kill them easily. And if his head was beheaded, no matter who he was, he would die. The young man was recalling memories of his previous life when Ronan held a single-handed sword and killed everyone in an instant. Maria immediately interrupted her thoughts. Okay, let's leave the explanation for later, let's get started. I think you will learn faster if you learn with your body instead of your head. She holds her sword firmly and is ready to fight. She prepares to rush forward. The young man leisurely holds the sword watching. Well, she is just a young girl. Maria rushed forward at lightning speed when the young man had not yet recovered. Because the speed and ability are so lightning fast that the young man has no time to defend. Fortunately, the young man's movements were quick enough to block her attack in a split second without his face flying off. While blocking the young man's attack while paying close attention to her abilities, oh it seems. That's also impressive. Maria's serious face and wide green eyes glared at him as if she wanted to devour him. Extremely dangerous, she was in fighting mode. She was quickly pushed back in just a moment. The sword's eyes clearly show deadly danger, no tolerance, fighting hard, a pair of blood-red eyes. The young man spoke, stop blocking, avoid. The young man's sword was almost hitting her. After hearing that sentence she regained consciousness. She quickly jumped back. One of the young man's moves was extremely strong enough to crush her body. Maria quickly used her sword to block the friction of the ground, lest she be shot backwards. She wondered, if I had been slow, something might have happened. You're not ordinary at all, Ronan smiled and replied, neither are you. In addition to mana, she is also very talented in swordsmanship, but her center of gravity is a bit unstable. The young man put away his sword and analyzed it. Then he left. If she could fix it, she would be much better. She was startled when she saw him turn away. What's wrong? Hey, where are you going? Don't say you think you've won. She aggressively pointed her sword at the young man. Ronan only replied very gently, remember to keep your promise anyway. She said that, but that's not true. What was surprising was that the sword gradually appeared to have cracks. 3 times, after finishing speaking, the sword in her hand broke into hundreds of pieces and flew in the wind. She widened her eyes in surprise and could only make a sound as if she couldn't believe her eyes. She was confused. No. But when did Ronan turn around and warn her, remember to hunt for the price of the sword? Before she could finish being confused, Asel teased her from behind. Asel used the brightest face possible because he understood her current feelings. Well done. He praised her because he had already experienced it. Ronan urged, hurry up, Asel, I'm so tired. Asel ran quickly to the young man, leaving Maria still in disbelief. The two of them left behind Maria, who was still standing there dumbfounded with one question ringing in her head, who were they? Why are you so slow? Asel laughed. The next morning, all three of them followed Maria. When they arrived, Ronan spoke, I just came here to get money. But what was that? Both of them stared at the thing before their eyes. Books, that's exactly 2 school bags stuffed with a bunch of books, a basket of rice and a few bags of money. She nodded, yes, that's what I need to study for Filion's theory test. She smiled sarcastically, no need, the test will be in a month. The young man apologetically asked, need, but why do you have to do that? And Asel's eyes lit up like she saw money. The young man drew his sword out of suspicion. If you were plotting something, Maria smiled and dispelled the doubts in the young man's mind. No, don't worry, I just like you guys. She smiled and said cheerfully, I did this because I wanted you guys to park, of course it was free. Asel looked at her admiringly like a god. As soon as the young man heard the word free, he agreed. If possible, I would like to teach you two privately, but I have to go now. Before leaving, she patted the young man's chest and smiled and wished him to study hard. If you still fail like this, I won't let you go. Do you understand? Ronan smiled and wished her well. In fact, she also had to work hard. So Maria got on the carriage and waved goodbye, then see you in the capital on the day of the test. Remember to read all the books, Asel happily waved back. Ronan suddenly thought, it feels like I have to train this weak body, I also need to learn because I can't be lucky. But this feeling is not so bad, the young man was excited when thinking about it. So Ronan's life after returning home was similar to the past but began to have small changes. He ate with Iril, eating enthusiastically and admiringly, surprising his sister. To the point where his stomach is stretched after every meal, the young man eats 4 or 5 bowls each meal. Seeing his younger brother eat like that, Iril smiled happily. My younger brother really eats well. Besides those calories, he started hunting monsters on the outskirts of the village and began to increase his endurance and adaptability. He practiced day and night until he was tired. This is fine for today, isn't it? The young man killed so many monsters that there were no more monsters wandering around the village. Whenever there was a monster, the young man slashed it, sweeping away actively and enthusiastically. Besides that, he even studied something that was unthinkable for a disciplined soldier. He was annoyed while doing his homework and cursing under his breath. Wait a minute, why do I have to remember the eating rules of the locals? Even though he didn't know what the outcome would be, he still did his best. The pile of books Maria left behind was thoroughly and diligently studied by the young man even though he didn't want to. And a month quickly passed and we finally reached the main stage of the story. The young man came to the capital city named Valon, a magnificent palace with excellent facilities, a place where dreams come true. In the center of the capital is the Empire's top educational facility, the small city of the White Tower, whose symbol is 2 swords forming an X shape. Asel arrived and her face was full of excitement when she saw what was before her eyes. This was Filon. Are you amazed by the magnificent scenery and the hustle and bustle of the city and its development? While he was busy watching, Ronan immediately interrupted his emotions from behind. Why are you standing in the middle of the road like that, Asel? Don't be so rude and go in. We're late for the test. Asel was startled when she was reminded. I'm sorry. While talking, he felt strange when he saw Ronan this time. Why are you talking like that? Ronan asked angrily. He hesitated. No, nothing. I'm just surprised it's only been a month. But you've grown a lot, Ronan. At this point, your body has improved quite a bit and you suddenly have a strange aura, too. Ronan knocked Asel on the head to wake her up and then grumpily said, stop talking nonsense and come in quickly. The young man went inside and thought, now he remembered that he was in Filon so maybe he would meet him. Sword Saint Shile Effan, a descendant of Grantia, a famous swordsmanship family considered the strongest geniuses in the empire. He's probably around my age, so he might meet me at the checkpoint, the young man thought to himself. But it doesn't matter. Asel suddenly interrupted her thoughts and asked, but Ronan, do you have that? The young man didn't understand what he meant. What is that? He repeated, the feathers of the dream bird from last time could lead us to the owner of that bird. The young man spoke up. I thought you were talking about something else. The young man pulled out the feather and replied, I brought it along because I remembered that person lived in the capital. I was about to go visit him after the test, when suddenly the feather moved, startling him. He raised his head to look at the building's tower, the highest floor. Phew, it's not easy. I'm still not used to this professor job, the person inside complained. Should I go back to doing research? While complaining, the dream bird chirped a few times, startling the young man. Are you cheering me on, Marpe? He rubbed it affectionately. Yes, I must continue to try to repay the hero who saved you, that is Filion's zoology professor Varan Fanashir, whose characteristics are lion people. Then he went to the window and said, okay, let's open the window for air, and if our hero comes by today, it will be very troublesome. Suddenly he saw something coming out. What? Is that so? I hadn't knocked on the door yet, but it opened on its own. A young man appeared with a voice as if from the underworld of hell, then smiled sinisterly and looked scared. The professor immediately froze, including the bird. The young man still didn't understand the problem. Oh, it's the blue bird from before, so you're the owner of a beast, huh? The two fought very fiercely. Oh look. The two people's blows create enormous pressure. The young man was a little surprised as he fought. She was already so strong at such a young age. Did she still use dual swords? I don't really know, but is this some kind of mana strategy? The young man thought while fighting. She was surprised. What's wrong with this guy? Not only did I intend to finish him off in one fell swoop, but I also intended to show him the power of mana and make him skip the test. So it would be better than being humiliated in the inspection area. The thought of seeing the young man being laughed at made her unable to bear it. But I was the one being pushed back. How could this be the skill of someone who couldn't use mana? She had a lot of doubts in her heart. No way, she was so busy thinking that she lost focus. The young man pulled her back by saying, what are you thinking about? Ronan suddenly walked into the room from the window, causing Professor Varan to be terrified, clutching his dream bird and screaming loudly. Who are you? How did you get in here? This is one of the highest floors. The scream made Ronan a little uncomfortable. He held a feather in his hand, scratched his ear and exclaimed, he scared me to death. I thought I was going deaf. Asel also rode in from the window, feeling a little guilty. Voice. That's why I said take the stairs. The dream bird Marpe was still extremely scared and snuggled into Professor Varan's arms. He patted and reassured it and then let out a loud snort and shouted, are you following my Marpe? Ronan saw that this person still doubted him, so he raised the green feather in his hand. Professor Varan saw this hair and his eyes widened, as if remembering something. He looked back at the two people who had just climbed into his room's window and exclaimed, these are the saviors who freed my baby. Warm light shone into the room through the window. Professor Varan quickly said, oh my god, I'm so rude in front of my benefactor. After the misunderstanding was cleared, Professor Varan quickly invited Ronan and the two to sit down in a chair. He was very embarrassed that he had misunderstood them. He continued to apologize, hoping that they would forgive him. When Ronan heard that, he immediately refused. Said patiently, I said it's okay, why do you keep repeating it? Ronan looked at Dreambird and continued, if you want to be clear, it's his fault, he climbed out the window on his own. Asel sat next to him and heard him say that, confused and silently said, it's him, he told me. Using remote control because I find taking the stairs annoying is Ronan. Seeing that Asel was talking too much, Ronan quickly reached out and squeezed her mouth, warning and speaking in an orderly manner. His ears were quiet. Ronan observed Professor Varan for a moment and then continued, the important thing is that I couldn't imagine that a sphinx, an extremely rare demi-human, was the owner of that bird, and I'm also a professor at Filon. The dream bird had calmed down now, it was leisurely perching on Professor Varan's shoulder. He heard Ronan say that and helplessly smiled and said, I was also very surprised, I didn't expect our hero to be candidates taking the exam at this academy. Professor Varan felt a bit guilty and continued to say, it's so embarrassing, if I knew in advance I would have written a letter of recommendation for you, but today is exam day, I hope that doesn't happen, but what if you fail? Hearing this, Ronan whispered, thinking why would he say those bad words, he immediately spoke up to interrupt Professor Varan, oh it's okay, we just came here to ask something, you know, we don't have plenty of time. Stop for a moment, he opened his hand holding the bird egg, asked suspiciously, what is this? That blue bird gave birth to it. Professor Varan was extremely surprised when he saw it. He immediately adjusting the frames of my glasses to see more clearly. I couldn't believe it. What did Marpe give birth to? Noran brought his hand closer for the professor to see more clearly. In his hand, the sparkling purple bird's egg lay neatly. Professor Varan quickly picked up the egg to look at it and then asked Noran again, did you say Marpe gave birth to it? Seeing Professor Varan's questioning expression, Noran shrugged and replied, so what about birds laying eggs? Anything surprising? Professor Varan's face was sweating, he frowned and said, this is not just an ordinary blue bird, it is a dream bird, but what is even more surprising is that. He raised his hand holding the egg and said worriedly, I don't know what will hatch from this egg. Hearing that, Ronan crossed his arms and said in confusion, what are you talking about? If it's a bird egg, it will give birth to a bird, right? What child? Professor Varen shook his head and said, dream birds are different. He looked intently at the egg and then began to explain, depending on the surrounding environment, the dream bird will absorb unique mana and then lay eggs. If there is lava around, the egg will hatch into a fiery phoenix. If it is in a monster's nest, the dream bird that is born will have the shape of that monster, and there are also cases where the thing that hatches from the egg does not have the shape of a bird at all. Professor Varen put the egg on the table and said worriedly, of course if I analyze the mana emitted from that egg, predicting the shape of the dream bird in that egg is not impossible. But this egg, Professor Varen caressed it and continued, carries many mixed mana fields, like smelting an alloy, they melt and mix together, it's so embarrassing, but now it's very difficult to dare. Sure, what is this egg? Noran saw that he was so worried, even sitting on one side was sweating, so he spoke up to reassure him, oh my god, with only one egg he put so much thought into it. Professor Varen didn't pay attention to Noran's words. He turned to blame the dream bird sitting on his shoulder, this scoundrel, where did you wander off to lay this egg? The dream bird showed its appearance. Innocently chirped. Noran saw a bird like that and said with disgust, I have never met a bird with such a thick face. Professor Varen, sitting opposite, quickly clasped his hands together and said a little cautiously, so I ask you to take care of him. Can you care for this egg? Noran heard that and was extremely surprised. He let out a sigh and nodded and said, well, actually, I don't have any problem. Seeing that Ronan agreed, Professor Varen happily said, this egg is extremely precious, a dream bird can only give birth once in its entire life. He turned his head to look at the dream bird affectionately, but if it had laid this egg in front of its benefactor, Marpe must have sensed something special. Professor Varen continued to speak softly, I also want to respect my friend who has been with me for a long time, so I will give this egg to you. The dream bird seemed to understand what its master meant, it happily bounced. Tickles on his back, constantly chirping. Holding the egg in his hand, Ronan bowed his head to look at it and then comfortably replied, no problem, I'm also curious about what will come out of this shell. Having said this, Ronan immediately stuffed the egg carefully into his pocket. Realizing that the time was running out, he and Asel stood up, looked at Professor Varen and said goodbye. Everything was done. Please excuse us, Professor. Monk Varen saw that Ronan wanted to leave and quickly reached out his hand and said, wait a minute. All this time he had been thinking about what to give Ronan. Then he remembered something very interesting, so he quickly stood up and ran to find it. Very soon Professor Varen returned, he handed a slightly crumpled and old scroll to Ronan. Seeing this, both of them were confused, not knowing what this was. A moment later, at the practical examination hall, the Galilean Palace. Inside the waiting room, countless candidates were present, filling all the rows of waiting chairs. The atmosphere here is very urgent, candidates constantly pray for themselves to smoothly pass this test. The contest secretary entered the waiting room and loudly announced that candidate number 111 had completed the test. After announcing, he continued to shout loudly, please invite candidate number 112. The candidate whose name was called seemed very nervous, his face drenched in sweat quickly stood up, his voice trembling and he replied, yes, yes. He quickly entered the room with a worried mind, the exam room door gradually closed behind him. Ronan was sitting on the side looking at the back of candidate 112 thinking, 112 already, next is me. He sat cross-legged, resting one hand on his chin and groaning. They waited for a long time. Complaining a few words, Ronan turned around and asked Maria sitting next to her, did she see that? Maria didn't even glance at her, she crossed her arms and calmly said, it's not like that. Seeing Maria wearing a very serious face, Ronan asked in confusion, why are you wearing that outfit, don't you feel uncomfortable? Maria heard that and immediately smiled faintly and replied, I did it on purpose, Filon is an academy. Private property of all nobles. After saying that, she put her hand on Ronan's shoulder, winking with excitement, in the future there will be top guests, so of course I shouldn't be sloppy, right? Ronan was speechless hearing that. This girl is right. That's very thoughtful. Leaning back in the chair, Maria lamented, it would be nice to have our baby here, what a pity. Ronan nodded in response, who knows what to do, the magic exam hall is somewhere else, he didn't cry. That's why I'm happy. Having just said this, the door of the exam room opened again, candidate number 112 walked out disappointedly, it looked like it was broken, the secretary following behind shouted loudly, candidate number 112 had completed the test. Next please invite candidate number 113. Ronan heard it was his turn and stood up. Maria was next to her and gently encouraged her, don't worry, just do your best as I told you. Seeing that he was almost entering the exam room, Maria suddenly called out, if you fail, I won't leave it alone. Ronan heard that and waved his hand and said, I know, thank you for your enthusiastic support. Just a few more steps to go through the door. Ronan firmly grasped the sword in his hand. He turned his head slightly and confidently said, "I'll be back later." Stepping inside, Ronan's eyes suddenly opened wide. Filion's 5 professors were sitting there seriously. Ronan looked intently at the 5 people in front of him. His eyes were bright and full of confidence. Looking at these 5 people, Ronan silently assessed that they all looked very outstanding. But among the 5 people here, Ronan's eyes focused on the old man sitting in the middle. He was the principal of Filon Academy, the great magician Krava Kratir. The woman sitting next to this old man also exuded an overwhelming aura. In his past life, Ronan had rarely felt as pressured as he was now. This woman was a sword instructor, the great swordsman Nabos. Looking around, Ronan immediately bowed low and politely said, "I'm Ronan." The principal immediately spoke up, "Nice to meet you, Ronan. I'm the principal of Filon Academy, Krava Kratir." He pointed to one direction and said, "You will fight a magic doll, so you can show off your techniques. Have you decided what moves you will show us?" Hear him say that the pastor stared at the doll in front of him, then nodded and said, "Oh yes, nothing special." He placed his hand on the hilt of the sword, bowed his head slightly so his expression could not be seen clearly, confidently continued, "It was just a quick sword strike. I think that was enough." Principal Krava Kratir heard that and huffed but said nothing. A teacher sitting next to him stroked his beard and said, "A simple slash that doesn't require mana." This teacher turned around and whispered to another teacher next to him, There wasn't such a candidate just now. They just evaluated the appearance of the magic dolls and said those stupid things." The other person also nodded in agreement and said, "Well, if it was a contestant from a faraway country, he might not know." Although the doll placed in front of him looks simple, it has the defensive ability to overcome aura, and can recover very quickly. It is a sophisticated product of magic. The 2 teachers were still whispering in each other's ears. Even the sword of some genius Shile Effan didn't leave any traces. I wonder what trick this guy is going to show us. Who knows? What if he tears it? How about double it? The principal sitting in the middle heard all these words. He looked towards the other 2 teachers and thought, he was right in front of them and they still said such offensive words. He thought about this, his eyebrows furrowed together, a little worried. What if this child could prove them wrong? Principal Krava Kratir put those thoughts out of his head and focused on observing the move that Ronan was about to use. Ronan's face exuded a steadfast and confident look. How could such a young person have this kind of courage? A sword that Ronan slashed carried terrible power, slashing straight at the magic doll's head. When the great swordsman Nabos saw this move, he was stunned and seemed very surprised. After performing this move, Ronan didn't show anything but quickly retracted his sword and took a step back. He looked at the 5 people sitting next to him and nodded and said, "I'm done." The 2 teachers from earlier were the first to speak. "Ha ha, oh my god, I didn't expect that it would only take one sword strike. The grading of this exam is a bit vague." The person sitting next to him turned to ask the principal, "Do you think so?" Principal Krava Kratir did not answer this question. He was still gaping motionless on the spot. His eyes opened wide, his surprised face began to be covered with sweat. Before he could react, the great swordsman Nabos stepped on the table with one foot, making the surrounding professors extremely frightened. Her eyes were bloodshot. She pulled out her sword and rushed towards where Ronan was standing. Nabos's body exuded a terrifying oppressive aura. She coldly placed the sharp blade on Ronan's neck. The storm began to rise in this small room. Ronan still stood there calmly, without the slightest fear. Looking at the sharp blade on his neck, Ronan frowned and said, "Are you threatening me?" Nabos's eyes exuded a cold light. She asked seriously, "Who are you? That sword technique, who taught you?" Ronan didn't understand what the other person meant when he asked him who he learned the sword from. The other person didn't explain but asked him another question. "Did you see my sword?" Ronan nodded and expressed appreciation. Her swordsmanship is truly superb. Drawing the sword suddenly like that is very difficult. Yet she swung her sword 3 times. At his answer, Nabos's attitude suddenly became unpleasant. "It's true, Dad, just like what you showed us, that arrogant sword slash of yours." Her words made Ronan human. His bewildered appearance made Nabos even angrier. She thought during the fight earlier. When he performed the slash on the doll, he deliberately cut the last stroke very slowly to prevent them from seeing clearly. That action officially angered the opponent. She warned loudly, "Have you forgotten where you are?" The principal was speechless and did not dare to speak. Other professors also harbored doubts. Ronan realized that she had misunderstood him. He was just adjusting his hand strength because he thought that the sword would not be able to block the final slash. But when she saw the other person's angry expression, maybe if he said anything, she wouldn't believe it. A moment later, Nabos slowly lifted the sword away from Ronan's neck. This action of hers made Ronan suspicious. He did not expect that the other person would just forgive him like that, but he immediately regretted it. Before leaving, Nabos warned that he would definitely teach him again. The principal quietly looked at Nabos and considered. With her challenge, she will probably accept Ronan as her disciple. So he needed to pay more attention. Then he turned around and said to Ronan, "Good job, Ronan. Then we will end today's test with an open-ended question and answer, so just say what you think makes the most sense. What do you want to learn when you go to Filon Academy?" Ronan asked himself how he should answer that question, until he remembered his dead comrades. So that you don't have to regret it again. That was the first thing he wanted to learn. The principal's eyes seemed stunned when he knew his goal. He seemed to understand and then allowed Ronan to go out. The hall door slowly closed. The principal still hasn't recovered from Ronan's answer. How can he not regret it? It's really troublesome. I don't know how I should teach that boy. His state makes the professor next to me confused. What's going on? First Professor Nabos and now the principal too. What did that boy do that caused the two of them to end up like this? Did he use any clever tricks? The principal immediately looked at the doll. Using tricks. That's a good way to explain it. Actually, maybe we should call him Kai Tai. As soon as he finished speaking, the doll's head split in half. The professors gasped. They didn't expect what happened to the magic doll. Its head fell to the ground. And the person who made it all happen was still lounging outside the door. He thought of Nabos's sword from earlier. Even in his previous life, he was not sure of victory. Perhaps he has truly met a worthy opponent, but it seems like the road is still very long. And that's a good first step to the academy. If you stay here, you will definitely learn a lot of things. Right now there's only the written test left. He's been able to remember it all this month. Therefore, you can confidently consider this final exam to be easy. However, after finishing the exam, Ronan's emotions sank. Hopeless, he must have regretted crowing so loudly. The feeling of depression increasingly surrounds Ronan. Maria turned to ask Asel in confusion. She didn't expect him to not be able to complete even half of the lesson. Why is that? I remember telling him to look at what was in his bag. Hearing that, Asel hesitated. Because Ronan took his things to take to school and then put his bag somewhere else. Because he was so focused, he forgot his bag. Asel was extremely regretful. He blamed himself. It was me. If I had reminded him, things wouldn't have turned out like this. Maria standing next to her was extremely uncomfortable. She couldn't believe that such a stupid person still existed. Okay, she turned to ask, so since the test ended, he's been like this forever, when will the results come out? After a while, Maria went to cheer Ronan up and said, I know, don't frown anymore, the practice is still more important, it's okay, with your skills, I'm sure. While comforting me, a practitioner nearby said in panic, look, the results are here. Immediately after that, the announcement list appears. Maria and Asel walked over nervously. They didn't think there would be results so quickly. Asel ranked 12th in practice, 1st in theory. Maria of the martial arts department ranked 9th in practice, 9th in theory. Just after seeing the results, the two turned to look at each other. Maria couldn't hold back her joy. She hugged Asel's neck and was happy. We passed. Asel, you even took the theory test. You got first place. Asel couldn't believe your results. Even though there are two people with the same rank as Asel. But it was still first class. Maria was extremely excited and patted his head. Asel shyly said it was just luck. At that moment, Maria remembered Ronan and turned back to ask him what his rank was. But before her eyes was the teenager's collapsed appearance. He was extremely emaciated when he learned that his name was not on the board. Hearing him say that, the two were surprised. They couldn't believe that someone like Ronan couldn't get in. Have you looked carefully? This is impossible. Ronan let Maria torture him. He whispered, I read every name. I told you, I did really bad. I was still in despair. Then suddenly there was a loud explosion behind them. Ronan didn't understand what happened. Maria explained that it was a fireworks display for the valedictorian of the entrance exam. That explosion came from the fire phoenix. It waved its wings and flew in the air, then spit out a spot of light. This thing flew straight towards Ronan in his naivety. When the light was just approaching, the content inside was the valedictorian. This person was Ronan, with first place in practice and 5,712th in theory. All three of them were stunned for a long while. When they realized this truth, Maria and Asel rushed forward to hug Ronan tightly. Yet you are the valedictorian in martial arts. Very good, Ronan, you are the valedictorian. I knew you were a genius. I guess I have an eye for good people. While being happy, Ronan was stunned as if remembering something. If you ranked first, then it means he lost to you. With that character of the opponent, there is no way he will leave it alone. This is a bit strange. Not long after, the opponent also appeared, along with a gloomy state. So it was you, the one who placed first in the practical exam. As soon as he heard that voice, Ronan was stunned. He knew right away. Right? Encounter each other like this. The opponent slowly approached. This person is the sword Shile Effan. Ronan looked bewildered at the other person walking closer to him. The student nearby seemed extremely excited. He was a Shile Effan. I didn't expect that I would meet the rising star of the empire here. Maria reminded Ronan, it seems like he has something to tell you. Asel next to him trembled. The atmosphere around him was so scary. Ronan was equally worried. The opponent's appearance was still the same as before. Can't stand anyone better at swordsmanship than him, that fierce attitude. You need to avoid conflicts. Then Ronan hesitantly said, I didn't know that I ranked first. This comment seemed to make Shile Effan even more upset. Why did you lie? Ronan said urgently. What do you mean? You said you don't know. You don't know. Do you want proof? Don't cause trouble and just move on. Shile Effan drew his sword, as if he wanted to use the sword as an answer. Then suddenly attacked Ronan. Fortunately, Ronan reacted quickly and blocked it. He didn't seem to expect the opponent to strike such a dangerous blow. Maria and Asel were extremely worried about Ronan. Shile Effan said coldly, isn't this proof enough? If you weren't ranked first, you wouldn't be able to block that attack. Learn from the surroundings to shout at each other and fight. Shile Effan didn't care about his surroundings and challenged Ronan, show me the skill that made you surpass me, even though he tried to avoid it. But the opponent still didn't let go. Ronan was extremely frustrated. This time he rushed forward to attack the opponent himself. Let me show you. He jumped into the air and continuously fired 3 swords. Shile Effan was completely incapable of fighting back. He could only ignore it. Right at the moment of danger, Shile Effan finally swung his sword in time to block it. Ronan angrily shouted at him, you're crazy, aren't you happy? Shile Effan was silent for a long time and looked down at his trembling hands. Only then was he able to calm himself down and reply, no wonder you received high scores, your technique is good. But it's just as I thought. That wasn't enough to defeat me. After saying that, he rushed towards Ronan and attacked. This determined state of his makes Ronan startled. Have you lost your mind? Calm down. Shile Effan hasn't lost any of his strength but has even increased it. Not only that, he doesn't even use to urge Ronan. Fight with all your strength. It seemed that being robbed of the top position made him extremely angry. Even unacceptable, Shile Effan compresses this wrath into the next blows. Just dodging the attack, Ronan was extremely worried. This idiot. Do you want to rush to your death? This is why I don't want to run into him. At this rate he'll start using aura. The situation is getting worse. Shile Effan can create a whirlwind from just one blow of his sword. The intense aura is called Sword Storm. Ronan will not be able to resist it. Then he used his strategy by turning his back. This action of his made Shile Effan angry. What are you doing, turning your back on your opponent in a match? Ronan didn't pay attention to the other person's words and ran towards Asel. Shile Effan followed behind. Asel was startled when he saw Ronan taking me as a hostage. He was stunned. Shile Effan paused. He was insulted by his gentle actions, using a lady as a shield and calling himself a knight. Asel helplessly explained, I'm a boy, and Shile Effan's state of mind made Ronan proud. As he thought, the other person's temperament did not change, even when he was about to die. He was going to defend the honor of a knight, then he took the opportunity of his indignation and suddenly hit him in the face. The opponent staggered backwards in pain. Ronan urgently told Asel, right now, Maria Asel, run. Just like that, Shile Effan watched helplessly as his enemy fled. Ronan took his 2 friends and ran away. Suddenly, in the distance, the head of the security force stepped forward. He pushed through the crowd and spoke loudly. I heard there was a fight here. When he saw Shile Effan with bruises on his face, he panicked. What's wrong? Are you okay? Who would dare do that to you? Please describe those people. The academy security team will chase. Shile Effan turned around to fix the wound on his face. Then he said again, no need to be polite. I'm not the family's son now. Duke family, but just a candidate with commoner status. Surely you don't need to worry. This is a fair duel. I will take care of it myself. And after calming him down, Shile Effan turned to treat the wound on his body. But the next image made him stop. The sword in his hand has been cracked ever since. This is a sword made from the highest grade mithril. He thought that Ronan's swordsmanship was nothing outstanding, but he didn't expect that he could cause the sword to be like this. This aroused interest in Shile Effan. This definitely won't end here. The next day, on the outskirts in the Shimo forest. After walking for a while, Ronan's footsteps stopped. After looking at the map and comparing the situation outside, it was definitely nearby, and Asel was tiredly running after. Waiting for him to regain his strength, he hesitantly asked, Ronan, is this okay? Ronan looked at him in confusion. Asel confusedly explained, I'm talking about the person you beat yesterday. I heard he was the heir to the Duke Grancia family, the family second only to the royal family. You broke his nose. What if he takes revenge? Ronan said without any fear. Don't worry, he is a good person, just crazy about swordsmanship. He always maintains his principles and beliefs. is everyone's ideal model for the hero who always protects the weak, or we can say the image of a perfect gentleman. Maybe he would say what happened yesterday was a fair duel. If not, we are behind bars now. Obviously Ronan's words are correct. You understand Shile Effan so well that you can know what the other person will say. After hearing Ronan's explanation, Asel felt more secure. Ronan then spoke again, but more importantly, look over there, I think we're here, the spirit veins that Professor Varen mentioned. Fernando Springs. Don't know why young Mana cries out to the world and gathers in one place, creating bodies of water called spiritual veins, and by its existence, Mana will seep into the surrounding area. An ordinary stone can become a high-class Mana stone, and a blade of weed can also be turned into a magical herb, famous for its miraculous uses. Its value is immeasurable, and most people try to capture it. After feeling the abundant spiritual energy in the water, Ronan couldn't help but feel, that professor is truly generous, yet he let us come here to hatch an egg. How do you feel, Asel? Do you feel any difference? Asel kept nodding. This is the first time I've felt a dense amount of mana gathered in one place. If I were here, I could easily perform magic transfer, stronger than usual. And the egg in his pocket was the same as before. It was absorbing magical energy at an incredible speed. It seemed to like the energy here. Ronan also seemed to agree with her opinion. I see, I don't know. Maria would also like this place very much. If she wasn't busy with business, she would have come with us. What a pity. Asel nodded in agreement with his opinion. Suddenly his body shook slightly. Asel hesitantly asked Ronan, isn't it a bit strange? Ronan looked at him confused. When Asel continued, Professor Varen said, because there is a lot of mana here, there will be many types of fantasy coming here to nest. Even normal animals are the same. This place is very good. But why don't we hear any animal sounds? Hearing her speak, Ronan suddenly realized. The surrounding area was extremely quiet, with absolutely no sign of other species. He blamed himself, he was too subjective. Everything is out of control again. Why do things like this happen everywhere you go? Your attitude makes Asel confused. What's going on? Ronan did not explain but reminded, mentally preparing to go to Asel, at the same time deep in the forest, where light can hardly reach. The carcass of an animal that has just been finished off. It emitted a bloody smell as if signaling the appearance of strangers. Asel hesitantly turned around and asked, what do you mean it smells of blood? Ronan stared in one direction and said, what do you think I mean? Which means there were guests here before us. Of course the guests are here. Is an uninvited guest. At the same time, deep in the forest, there was a group of people aiming arrows in his direction. Ronan quickly picked up his sword to prepare for battle. One strike of his sword immediately caused those arrows to lose their power. Suddenly an arm appeared. Boom! A shadow monster appeared. Surely you have seen this arrow before. In my previous life, I was in the disciplinary team barracks. A teammate picked up that arrow and said, do you know how terrible this thing is? Suddenly Minjun discovered something and said, wait. What do you guys think, Captain? You want it too, don't you? Captain Ronan said with a laugh. He's starting again. When you get caught, you use it to hunt, so what are you still bragging about? Will you shut up? The other teammate immediately argued back. I tell you, these two are good things. The person who used this arrow hundreds of times and successfully poached was a high-ranking member of our organization. Suddenly, Minjun realized something. Now seeing that arrow again, Ronan immediately recognized that it was a group. He wondered if their rank was the same as that of hunting dogs. Thinking about this, Ronan seemed a little excited. He reminded Asel, you should hide somewhere, try to turn into a hedgehog at the end of the road. Dongjun took out the gift, looked at it and happily said, thank you, I will use it well. Understanding that, his body rushed towards the deep forest. Inside the forest, the group of Calaboro people were hiding to one side and chatting. What is this bastard? He just stopped all the arrows with just one slash, all these arrows soaked in mana. Who the hell is he? At this moment, Ronan had chased closer to the crowd. The leader immediately ordered his subordinates to bring all the sacks and we will surround and attack him. Ronan quietly observed their actions. As he thought, this guy was very decisive. Is it because his husband was different from the brats he encountered in the forest? When he saw them spreading out in all directions, he realized the situation was not good. While talking, Minjun said, actually, the battalion commander of the training station gave me a proposal, recalling the time I met the battalion commander and discussed it with him in the room. Ronan continued to say, why, it seems you guys haven't heard the news yet. I am the youngest hound from the Dharma's tribe, a Hayute. Calaboro's group quickly returned to confirm with Ronan, are you really a hunting dog? Ronan looked surprised and affirmed, that's right. What, don't you believe me? The leader immediately said, how can I believe a kid like you is a hunting dog? If you said you were from a low-level tribe, I would still believe it. Ronan looked careless and replied to them, "If you don't believe me, then why don't you ask the wolf of your tribe, which I really advise. Thinking about someone's stomach is a bad habit, wild dog brother." The most pitiful thing in the world, Ronan's challenge made him angry. He was so worried that he grabbed his collar and cursed, "You miserable brat, how dare you insult me? Do you want me to chop off your limbs?" Even though Ronan had a knife on his neck, he still did not panic. He calmly replied, "His habit of cursing people is equally bad. The end of such a person is usually the same. There is no ending." Another of his friends came forward to stop him. "Hey, calm down, just because he's a child you doubt him." He knew about and mentioned the Calaboro hierarchy as well. "Only our army knows that. Just confirm with the captain first. If he doesn't lie, we will have a disagreement with the Dharma's tribe later." Right at this moment, from behind the tree, a large figure stepped forward. He raised his voice and said, "I told you to stay quiet and guard and always be ready. What the hell is going on?" His words made the crowd turn at the same time. They respectfully greeted the leader of the Demaya tribe, Wolf Viam. The Bauhaus immediately let go of Ronan's collar and gradually walked towards him. "Just in time, Captain," this kid said. While he was whispering, Ronan happily smiled. The wolf was here. "That means they're all here, right?" Viam, after hearing his subordinate's story, loudly asked, "Hey kid, are you a Hyute from the Dharma's tribe?" Ronan warmly answered him, "Yes." The other person looked at him with suspicious eyes. "Strange, why did you come here? It's already been decided that this mountain range belongs to Demaya." Ronan did not appear confused at all. On the contrary, he calmly admitted, "The basic gist of the Hunter Corps swordsmanship is to adapt it to suit yourself." Before the enemy could react, Ronan destroyed everyone near him. The sight of his comrades dying right before his eyes made the leader stunned, but Ronan smiled happily. "I just used a name I knew." Then, the lieutenant continued to speak loudly, "First of all, the basics are important, so look at me and follow. Don't roll your eyes around but focus on." With one swift sword strike, the opponent's head was severed from his neck. The Bauhaus stood there stunned. Minjun looked at the sword movements and realized something. He knew why he trained with the main. His outcome would be terrible. As soon as his voice fell, the Bauhaus looked at his severed finger in horror. The blue veins on his face appeared, and a feeling of pain came at the same time. He was shouted down by someone. As soon as the scream rang out, Ronan ordered him to shut up. I threw him a piece of paper and said, "If you don't want to get punched here, calm down and take this. From now on I will write down the locations of all the tribes I know." He didn't understand what Ronan meant. Then while thinking and practicing the movements, it was time to jump up high, surprising everyone. Then there is no reason to keep him alive anymore. Bauhaus begged in fear, "Don't kill me, you can do whatever you want me to do, but I don't have anything to draw a map with." Ronan immediately said, "What are you whining about? I'll make you a pen." "I don't have anything to say, Private First Class Kim Minjun knows." Not long after, he finished drawing what he needed. Ronan nodded appreciatively. "I think he drew very beautifully, so talented. This guy is obsequious and flattering, thank you, so as promised, you will forgive me, right?" Ronan pushed the piece of paper into his body before answering him, "What about this?" Just when he didn't understand anything, Ronan's sword slash caused the opponent's body to be cut in half. Then started practicing according to the lieutenant's instructions. If Professor Varen saw this scene, he would probably be very sad. After Ronan returned, he and Asel continued on their journey, but Asel's condition seemed not to be very good. "Ronan next to me is confused, don't overdo it. I told you to prepare yourself," Asel answered with difficulty, "Sorry. But that's really a bit too much. Actually, this whole thing was done by Calaboro, and what she was talking about was the corpses of animals around. There are so many of them that they could form a mountain." Ronan calmly replied, "I said it before, letting him live is a crime." Asel was still hesitant about Ronan killing someone earlier, but he interrupted, "Don't worry, they are all wanted people, they need to be killed." After saying that, his heart suddenly sank, anyway. Because the bird he loved was killed by them. While he was sad, suddenly his bag vibrated violently. There seems to be something inside that wants to escape. He didn't understand what was wrong with it, but Asel next to him suddenly called his name. He trembled and pointed in front of him. Ronan looked confusedly in the direction he pointed. His eyes were shocked. The blood of previously killed animals suddenly floated into the air. A huge amount of blood rushed towards the two people. Ronan was immediately alert. He was upset and didn't know what was going on. While he didn't know what was going on, the egg he was holding in his hand suddenly fell out. A strange light emitted from inside. It floated and flew towards the blood. It seems to be absorbing. Asel asked in fear, "Ronan, what is this?" He shook his head in annoyance. "I don't even know what to ask you, idiot." "That's not true. I know one thing. Whatever is inside this egg, that word is definitely not ordinary. After a while, the egg returned to normal and flew in front of Ronan. It seemed like the blood-sucking process had ended. But it didn't seem like there was much change, but not long after the egg's shell cracked. Inside, it was as if something was stirring and wanted to escape. Ronan and Asel waited anxiously. It looked like it was about to hatch. Great, time to try it and see what it is. Let's see if it looks worth it. Ronan's excitement was met with a heavy blow. He painfully held his nose. But what was inside the egg was clearly visible. In front of the two people was an animal that looked like a dream bird, because it had wings. But no matter how you look at it, it still doesn't look like a bird at all. Asel looks more like a dragon. Ronan was surprised by his idea. Asel continued, it looked similar to what I saw in the book. Hearing that, the two of them began to imagine, where did it absorb the mana that gave birth to something like this, a dragon? He raised his hand to caress it. It looked so cute. But this way of greeting is a bit too slow. You stabbed me right on the bridge of my nose, he said while pointing to his injured nose. The animal seemed to understand and channeled some spiritual energy. Immediately the wound on Ronan's nose was healed. He couldn't believe it when his wound disappeared. Asel was happy. It seems like this kid even knows how to use healing magic, and he seems to really like you. Ronan smiled looking at the animal that was constantly pampering him. This kid has more abilities than I thought. Asel excitedly urged, give it a name. Ronan, we can't just call it Dreambird. Ronan thinks what you said makes sense. But he didn't know what name to give. While thinking, the animal seemed to be noticed by something. Its eyes flashed with murderous intent and then aimed in a certain direction. Not long after, it rushed in the other direction. Asel was surprised. She didn't know where it flew to, but Ronan calmly seemed to know it in advance. Didn't you realize? It sensed the other guy's presence. Just a moment ago, not far away, someone was rushing away. He is the messenger of the Demaya branch. The scene before his eyes made him scared. What was going on? I just went to spread the news. Why is everyone already dead? And he also saw the process of the egg absorbing the blood sea. So he immediately wanted to escape from this place. At the same time, Ronan's dragon caught up. The opponent was in a hurry to escape and tripped over a tree. Just like that he fell to the ground. Ronan's dragon is getting closer and closer. With just one cry, suddenly the blood on this guy's leg seemed to be pulled out of his body. He was not only in pain but also covered in panic, his blood. Suddenly Ronan's voice rang out, stopping. Enough Sita, just like that he will die. Your voice immediately made him stop his actions. Asel asked in surprise, is its name Sita? Ronan nodded and replied, yes, I already had this name in mind. He had just teased Sita and said, what do you think, do you like that name? But the person on the ground was still shaking. He looked at Ronan in fear. Isn't he the guy from before? He must be the owner of that monster. Who is he? He was still sleeping in his thoughts when Ronan suddenly called him, hey. Are you okay, Ballrouse? The other person was startled by his words then knelt down again. Thanks to you I'm still alive, thank you very much. But why do you know my name? Ronan suddenly put the sword on his neck. He said coldly, you don't need to know that. While the opponent was still afraid of his sword, Ronan looked at him as if saying to someone, I didn't expect to meet you here. Anyway, nice to meet you. Is the poaching going well? Mr. Blood Dog Calaboro is very talkative. His words made the other person afraid. What, a blood dog? I'm just a messenger. Ronan laughed. Your rank is still so low, but that's okay, because there is something I need you to do, which is about the information you have. This is not like I'm asking you for help. That night at the shopping mall, Ronan happily held the money in his hand. It was great. More than I thought. Asel was also surprised by this result. He remembered the time in the forest, when Ronan smiled evilly and scooped up that spring water. He said the spring water also turned into gold. When he took it, Asel was quite confused. But Maria's father paid such a high price. Thanks to bananas, now we don't need to worry about money anymore. Ronan nodded in agreement. We owe Professor Varen too much. However, when the two of them went to the professor's house to thank him and show him the Sita, unfortunately he was on a business trip. Ronan excitedly thought about his achievements, along with the work he assigned to Balrouse. With the map he received from that hound, it was more than just a simple gesture. He made his friend from his previous life so scared that he didn't dare to have any other plans. At this time, Asel turned around and asked, what do you want to do with that money, Ronan? Second class is free of tuition and also receives a support fee, so you don't need to pay much. Do you want to do anything? His question made him hesitate. I thought about what I wanted to do. It's almost time for the welcoming ceremony. A few days later, at the Valen City carriage farm. The carriage driver bowed respectfully. It's here. Someone on the carriage replied, yes thank you. Iril sobbed and looked around. So this is the capital city Valen. So beautiful. Ronan went to greet his sister. He asked with concern, "She must be very tired." As soon as I saw him, Iril happily walked over. Ronan continued asking, "Nothing happened when you left?" "Your question made Iril angry. You should be the one to ask that question. Do you know how surprised I was when this magnificent carriage appeared in front of my house? How is that possible? I have no money. And why are you so skinny? Do you eat properly?" Ronan patiently answered his sister, "Rest assured, you eat a lot." His answer also made Iril feel more secure. Now she paid attention to the animal sitting on his shoulder. Ronan explained, "This is Sita. Because of some things, he started living with me." "But sister, we have to hurry, there's no time." Iril is confused. "Hurry up, where are we going?" Ronan grabbed her hand and pulled her away. He also explained that when I enter the academy I will be very busy for a while, so I want to do these things first. I definitely have to do this. After a long while, a worried look appeared on Iril's face. She hesitantly said, "Ronan, I know you're making a lot of money these days, and I also know that you have a scholarship so you can feel more comfortable." But Ronan didn't pay attention to her words and just nodded. "It's true that you can wear whatever you want." Iril is still in turmoil. She looked at the suit on her body and worried, wasn't this a bit too expensive? Ronan turned to ask the seller, "Can all of these be delivered to me?" The other person smiled brightly, "Of course." Iril panicked, "A whole bunch of things. Is this it?" Ronan seemed normal. It wasn't much, she had endured a lot of hardships. "It's time for me to raise you." His words made Iril look dumbfounded. "My little brother, when did you become this big? Everyone look at this, my little brother is so good." She was so happy with his wife that she wanted to run out and tell everyone in this city. Ronan ran after him and wanted to stop him. The staff in the store couldn't help but burst out laughing. The last name Hoa Tuan is so cool. Ronan was embarrassed and told his sister to leave. She happily asked, "Where are we going now?" Ronan replied, "Let's go see the workshop. A few days ago my sword was broken. Because of a crazy guy, I just opened the door and that crazy guy was already waiting outside. It's finally done." Ronan stared blankly at the other person. One person and one animal screamed in panic. "Why did you come out from there? Are you following me?" Shile Effan replied calmly, "I came to get a new sword. My sword was damaged by you. Then I happened to see you so I just waited, so don't accuse me like that." Ronan replied to the other person, "That's what you're watching, you bastard, are you crazy? Look at me. Do you still dare to say that? Who is at fault? Do you want me to show you what it's like to be broken?" The two looked at each other viciously, day by day predicting that a duel would continue to take place. Iril immediately stood in front of the two of them. "No way Ronan, I told you not to talk dirty." Ronan quickly explained, "I misunderstood, it was because of this bastard." Iril didn't give him a chance to explain and instead blamed me. "Are you arguing with me?" Shile Effan looked at her back in bewilderment. After stopping her younger brother, Iril turned around and apologized to Shile Effan, asking my brother to speak like that, but he was very obedient. That moment, the moment Iril turned to look at Shile Effan, a descendant of a prestigious family, a rising talent of the empire, saw something that shook her. Iril did not know this. But Shile said, "You were very shocked, right?" What made Shile Effan shaken was that he saw a woman. Seeing that Iril was still apologizing, Shile Effan was confused. After a while, he was able to speak. "It's all because of my lack of care, it's not your fault. Everything is because of me, so please rest assured." Hearing that makes Iril feel a bit more reassured, she happily said, "Really, you are so kind. Ronan has a friend like you. I'm so happy." After saying that, she immediately took Shile Effan's hand. Ronan brought himself out as he observed these two people. He didn't think everything would end so easily. Shile Effan rummaged around and said, "First I will compensate him for his sword, now I don't have any gold with me. So please accept this. This is proof of my family's identity. Can be used anywhere in the empire." Ronan gaped at what his sister was holding. He wanted to scream, "Do you know what it means to give this to her?" However, all of Shile Effan's attention was only on Iril. He reminded, "If you want to buy a sword, go to the smithy on the west side of this street. It's a place with a history of 500 years, so it's very difficult for ordinary people to enter, but if you hold that thing, you can enter. I hope you get a good sword." After speaking, Shile Effan blushed and left. Ronan still can't seem to escape this horrifying truth. Does that crazy guy know what he's doing? With that, you can buy a whole village. Is that really the sword St. Shile Effan that I know? The next morning, today was the day of the welcoming ceremony for Filon Academy. The principal said loudly, "Very pleased to meet you, students of class 787. I am the principal of Filon Academy, Krava Kratir. As you know, all of you passed the exam with excellent skills, and have proven your potential. When your limitless talent and Filion's higher education come together, I believe that you will make your name in the Empire's history. Congratulations to all of you, class 787. While he was giving his speech, Ronan was extremely depressed. But when I think of my older sister watching with emotion, it's all worth it. The principal snapped his fingers to signal. Immediately, a strange light appeared on the student's body. Everyone was startled by this sudden change. Everyone shouted to each other. The sky in front of everyone suddenly shattered. The surrounding space also changed accordingly. A voice echoed from the air, "It was a pleasure to meet the first years." Ronan was surprised. He didn't expect that the principal could move such a large yard with just a snap of his fingers. My principal smiled and said, "Okay, now it's the focus of the welcome ceremony, let's start the meeting between classes." The meeting was held between first years and second year students. The location was the first place they met. The process was quite stressful. It was also a special event at Filon. That battle was described as, when the two students with the highest scores on the entrance exam stood up to represent the first years. Assigned to be paired with the 4 best second years, the second years all had their own fighting styles. They will take turns one-on-one. The significance of this event is closely related to the teachers in Filon. It increases the relationship between the upper classes and the first-year students, so that they can learn about each other's strengths and weaknesses. This will supplement the students' knowledge, and this competition is also considered as the beginning of real learning. These battles are educational, and through them, representatives of each year will show their first steps forward in the academy. Of course, first years will be given the right to choose their opponents, and 5-2s cannot give up once they have been chosen. The principal did not forget to comfort him. "This is just a learning session, so don't feel pressured, first-year representatives, just relax." Ronan clicked his tongue in annoyance. He's beating around the bush again. What he said just made the first years more confused. On his opponent's side, the first person was a martial arts major, second-year academy rank 1, Nasdo. The second person is a second-year martial arts student, ranked 2nd, Braum. The opponent seems extremely excited to be fighting. The next person is the 4th-ranked martial arts major, Karen. The last person is the 3rd-ranked martial arts major, Irina. Braum's clear voice rang out, the Empire's top talent, Shile Effan, and the star the gang beat him in the practice test, Ronan. "I can't help it, I want to fight them so quickly." As he spoke, he laughed loudly and seemed to be satisfied. Ronan was a bit bored with the opponent. In his heart, he thought of his sister. Since things don't seem to be going in the planned direction, so I can show her that I won't be defeated easily. If I can show you my great combination with him, that would be great. At this moment, the principal's voice rang out, "Okay, the first years can freely choose their opponents." These words seemed to help Ronan have more ideas. He raised his hand and said, "Sorry, if it's okay, can I make a suggestion?" The principal was quite surprised by his words. Ronan continued, "Because we were free to choose our opponents. I want to be taught by all these respected seniors." This startled the principal. However, he still agreed to accept this condition. However, this is no different from a kind of challenge and contempt for second-year students. Even though he was surrounded by their murderous gazes, Ronan still did not forget to challenge. His seniors went up at the same time. Before the match, the principal and professors met to discuss. He turned to ask, "Ms. Nabos, what do you think about her proposal?" This professor said indifferently, "You just go ahead as he wants. Isn't Filon Academy's motto that if you have talent, you can do anything you want? So no matter who wins this match, it will have great meaning and show other students many valuable lessons. If things get out of control, I will intervene immediately." The principal pondered her words. After a moment, he nodded, "Then we will proceed like that." Before long, Ronan stood looking at his 4 opponents. Their eyes were angry and annoyed, obviously angered by his words. "It's ridiculous, how much does that brat look down on us? Is he doing what he wants just because he ranked first in the entrance? We should take advantage of this opportunity to teach them a lesson." Nasdo spoke up, "Everyone calm down and prepare for battle. Shile Effan, he's arrogant but very good. He's an opponent we can't underestimate. We'll go all the way from the beginning and attack them all, understand?" As soon as the attack ended, everyone immediately entered a fighting stance. Everyone took out their weapons. Extremely fierce state. That situation made Iril worried, the atmosphere was so chaotic. She couldn't help but scream, "Ronan, be careful. If you feel it's dangerous, you have to retreat immediately, remember." Ronan turned to look at her. He smiled and waved his hand to reassure her. This action of his made Iril's anxiety seem to have subsided. The principal stood on the stage and started shouting, "Okay, from now on. Battle between second year and first year. Officially started." As soon as the chant ended, Nasdo immediately took the initiative to attack Ronan. He quickly dodged to escape a fatal sword. The opponent this time was indeed very sharp. They were several levels better than Maria from before, meaning the 4 strongest second years were all on a different level. And above all, this time, Irina cooperated with Nasdo to attack. Her eyes glowed. The force in his hand became stronger. Immediately Karen rushed from behind, Irina lowered her head. Ronan surprised by their coordination. Extremely good group fighting skills, he used his sword to block Karun's spear. His whole body was knocked backwards. But that wasn't the end. Before he could rest, there was an enemy behind him. Brown raised his sword high in the air, preparing to slash down. At this moment, Ronan's situation is extremely dangerous as he is being squeezed. Brown said coldly, "Little Ronan, you look down on us a bit. I want to have a more intense battle with you, but this doesn't seem possible." Brown's blade is extremely fast and strong, and immediately followed by heavy attacks from other opponents, all of whom are at very high levels. However, in such a surrounded situation, Ronan's body suddenly disappeared. Brown's slash also fell into space because of that. Only then did the crowd realize when Ronan had moved. Why is he so fast? Just before they could react, Ronan simultaneously attacked. He couldn't stop feeling, Filon Academy is really great. He had just landed on the ground when Brown's figure next to him jumped up. Ronan didn't panic and teased, "Senior, you're really strong. His will to fight should have been crushed. You've fought hard, so I'll politely fight you until the end." Saying that, he raised his sword, preparing to receive the opponent's attack. His actions startled Brown. His current fighting stance completely matches Nabos. With 3 slashes, Brown had no chance to resist. The sword in his hand was beaten to pieces. Ronan smiled and said, "I learned a lot from this match." Senior. The whole hall had not recovered from the fight just now. Iril looked at her younger brother in shock. A man is fighting a group that looks like demons. When he regained consciousness, everyone was shouting, "Who was that person? So good." He seemed weaker at the beginning, but in just a moment he finished them all. Is he still a first year? The 4 second years all looked like they couldn't believe it. Nasdo looked at his broken sword and forced a smile. I couldn't compare to him, so there was nothing to complain about. Where did he come from? That weird name. Ronan was now looking intently at his sister. She was holding the collar of the person next to her and excitedly showing off. "Do you see? It's my younger brother." Ronan felt at ease now, so she didn't have to worry about being beaten anymore. And now, thinking, he looked at the 4 people in front of him. The seniors have worked hard. Today I learned a lot. Because I was so excited to join Filon, I opened my mouth like that. The power of my seniors was truly beyond my imagination. Thank you everyone for accepting the challenge of this young junior. My 2 best friends still can't believe the fight just now. Ronan bowed and continued, "Please forgive me. I hope I will be taught more in the future." His actions made these second years look at each other awkwardly. Suddenly Brown's loud voice rang out, "I thought you were a bad guy. Not only are you strong but you're also a polite junior. But don't be so humble. I admire this victory. You just have to be bold. Because that's what a Filon student is like." Having said that, the other person held Ronan's hand and raised it in the air like a winner. "Great skills, Ronan." He laughed. He fought as fiercely as his skills. Ronan's purpose for doing these actions was so that his sister wouldn't have to worry anymore. Iril, after torturing the person next to her until she was completely devastated, sobbed emotionally. She has truly grown up. At the same time, below the stage, there was a figure quietly observing Ronan's actions. The other person smiled. It was really interesting. That evening in the dining room, everyone spoke to each other about the fierce battle in the morning. Asel looked around and said, "They said there would be an opening party. I was wondering what it was." Private Lee Dongjin received very high marks. Maria smiled and said, "I heard that this is the most prestigious academy in the Imperial City. Shouldn't it be at least like that?" Ronan nodded in response. "That's right, there's nothing surprising." Asel turned to ask, "Why isn't Iril coming, Ronan?" He hummed and nodded. Then he couldn't help but remember his sister's many instructions before leaving and continued, "She was always worried, so it took some time to calm her down. I even let Sita go with me, so I don't have to worry about how she walks. After all, it's a dragon." Speaking of this, he remembered Sita's cool appearance. Privates must defeat 4 hounds, while first-class privates must defeat 3 goblins using special weapons. Now let's taste the food at Filon. Just when Ronan was about to enjoy the delicious food, there was a cold voice behind him. "Are you really going to eat it?" Ronan, he looked bewildered at the person talking behind him, then determined that the other person was Shile Effan. He was so angry that he broke his plate. "God forbid the food, what did you call it? Why are you here? What are you planning to cause trouble this time?" Shile Effan boldly said again, "I didn't come to start a fight. I only came to see some important information." Ronan looked at the other person with suspicious eyes. "What important information?" Shile Effan took out the notebook and began to interrogate. "Where is Miss Iril's house? Is there a star of the Imperial Citadel? How is the traffic there? Is the security there good? Do thieves not often appear?" Ronan doesn't seem to have a chance to intervene in that question. Shile Effan continued asking, "You must have arranged an army to escort the young lady. I believe you will at least find mercenaries to do that. Otherwise you're worse than a prisoner in Fodderland." Ronan angrily interrupted the other person's words. "I've done it, you bastard, I've done it. I'll send someone more trustworthy. Unless a wyvern or something appears, then nothing will happen, don't worry." But this statement seems to make Shile Effan even more worried. "What did you say? You mean if a wyvern appeared then lady would be attacked?" Seeing Shile Effan's criticism clearly in her eyes, Ronan was extremely upset. "Enough crazy. First of all, why are you making such a big deal about my sister? Who do you think you are and what relationship do you have with my sister?" Shile Effan's body trembled, he was completely weak at this point. After a while, Li Dongjin finally walked out of the tunnel towards the observation spot. While everyone was still fighting, a silhouette of a young woman passed by. She smiled and said, "This scene is interesting. Is the Graneshire wolf so talkative?" Shile Effan turned to look at the other person. The observers were all surprised and looking forward to it. The same goes for Sun Yunseo, even her commander. A baseball bat has pins on its head that go through it to form sharp points. "I'm just interested. Just with Ronan." Ronan opened his eyes and pointed at himself. "What's wrong with me?" "Why me?" Shile Effan observed the other person for a while and then sighed. "I guess someone was plotting something again. It's just a simple fight." But at this moment, Tar was still hesitant. Then I couldn't help but suggested to Ronan, "I thought I should at least send my family's guard to follow." The blue veins on Ronan's face appeared, he scolded harshly and went away. Suddenly a trembling hand pulled Ronan's shirt. Asel said in fear, "It was the person in the confrontation just now." Ronan calmly replied, "You don't need to explain, Asel, she's superior. The first second is close. Just relying on that can completely defeat the opponent." Erzabet smiled and said, "Don't you think you should teach those bearing their fangs a lesson?" "You understand what I mean, don't you, Ronan?" He replied indifferently, "I don't understand anything, but why did you come here?" Erzabet slowly walked over and said, "The talent you showed this time is really impressive. Sir, I'm here to make an offer. Something a lowly criminal could never dream of, a very special offer." Meinald's eyes looked up. "Is this an invitation from Erzabet?" The Akaluchias, unlike most nobles who value bloodline, value talent above all else. They have trained many talented people, and thus maintained their position as one of the two pillars of the empire. They give the opportunity to those who show their potential to become part of this family. The symbol of that opportunity is the pearl, which Ronan is holding in his hand. This is an invitation from the Akaluchias clan. He turned to ask Erzabet, "Are you allowed to give this to outsiders?" The other person smiled, "If you asked that, you must have known its meaning." Ronan thoughtfully replied, "I just heard people say that." He remembered the time he talked to the commander in the past. She also brought this out and said this was an invitation. At that time Ronan asked again, "And as long as I have it, even a tenant farmer like me can become a member of that powerful family?" Like the commander, Adishan nodded. "Of course you have to pass the chief's test, but truly talented people will pass. Remember, Corporal Ronan, when you redeem yourself in war, you may finally receive an invitation. Because I think you're quite talented." Ronan was stunned when he heard her say that. Returning to reality, he thoughtfully looked at the invitation in his hand. Erzabet continued, "If you already know, I probably don't need to explain anymore. I hope you will make a wise choice. Even if you're born a beast, if you stay with the sheep for too long, you will turn into them," she said, then turned and left. Behind him are subordinates with amazing abilities. Seeing the other person leave, Asel breathed a sigh of relief. She was gone. Ronan asked uncomfortably, "Does Thien Tai always do what he wants?" Then he looked down at the object and thought, "It's good that I have a way to communicate. Akalusia clan will help me." At Filon, a training institute that puts students' abilities first, depending on the scores, the environment can change greatly. A typical example is the dormitory system. This is where the average students are placed, the Netia court. Each person will get a clean room, a high-class cafe and many other things, a beautiful fully furnished dormitory. Conversely, students in the bottom 30% are placed in the Kratir court. Obviously, the students assigned to this court were extremely upset. They cursed, "What the hell is this place? We have to live in a dilapidated place. How about this? We're nobles, we should at least have a few servants." The waiters at this dormitory seemed familiar. He just calmly answered them, apologizing, but there were no staff. Each room sleeps 4 people, and the shower and bathroom are shared. This is the academy's rule, not mine, so young masters, study hard, otherwise you will stay here for the next semester. These nobles were obviously scared by those words. And finally, 10% of students, including Ronan, will stay at Nabadoza court. We can download the impression of this building in just one word, cool, and Ronan was also ready when he saw his room. A place as luxurious as a 5-star hotel. Is all this place for students? It's really a famous academy. At this time, he also paid attention to the papers placed on the table. This is the class registration form. He picked up the paper and read it, just writing the classes he wanted to take on the schedule. First-year adaptation is very important, so I heard it's best not to choose too many. But these classes all look so interesting. Ronan, like the other 3 students, has never experienced life and doesn't know the hellish feeling of taking a class, so he doesn't know how to choose. He hesitantly made a decision. Not long after, he finished choosing his classes. He chose many classes, and was even extremely pleased about it. And obviously, today's smile is the beginning of the end for me. At the basic royal swordsmanship class, Instructor Abar coldly said, "You don't need to take this class anymore." Ronan did not understand the reason why his teacher expelled him from school. He was annoyed. "What do you mean? We're just getting started." The lecturer smiled. "Dude, that's what I mean. We've just started." But I had perfected all the basic royal swordsmanship techniques. Ronan was still hesitant. Then he continued, "The academy's policy is to allow students to leave the class when they have learned everything. Curriculum. If we let you stay, it will do nothing but discourage the other students. Don't be complacent though, keep trying." Ronan collapsed and ran to the riverbank to sit, not only with royal swordsmanship. But the whole class said goodbye to the Dharma today. The monster hunting class too. They all kicked him out of class. Ronan scratched his head helplessly. It was nothing like what he imagined. Suddenly there was a voice. "You look so familiar, aren't you in class?" Ronan was startled and looked at the other person. Professor Nabos. She looked at him for a while then smiled. "I understand, you finished all those classes." Ronan groggily stood up and replied, "Yes, all classes are like this." "I thought Filon would be better than that." Nabos secretly looked at him in surprise. "I know it's only first-year classes, but to complete it right in the first day is amazing." He only needed to see it once to be able to imitate the technique. Well then, thinking of this, she slowly put down the sword on her back. "It's Professor Filon, I can't ignore it. Give me your sword." Ronan didn't understand what she meant, but he still listened. He wanted to ask her what she was going to do, but Nabos interrupted. "I will teach you a very important lesson." Seeing that, Ronan was upset. "Why did you take my sword?" His words had not yet finished when there was a sound of cutting the wind flying past, a slash that made the river surface behind him tremble. Ronan was startled by the power of this attack. Nabos looked regretful. "I think this iron can only do that. Something like that can't be called a weapon. It just reduces the user's strength. Look closely." Nabos said, then took out his sword. At that moment, Ronan's mind was extremely shocked. Nabos sharply slashed a sword energy. The river behind seemed to be flipped upside down, turning into rain. Ronan stood there stunned. He looked at her sword slowly in its sheath. Nabos smiled and said, "Do you see what my skin is missing? A weapon is a block of iron forged to be strong and sharp to fight enemies. It is best that it is not broken when picked up, because if it is broken, people will have to find a new one. But this new thing can only be considered usable." This is Ronan's thinking. So when he saw the power of Nabos' sword, he seemed to realize something was wrong. Only the sword is different, and Nabos' cutting style is exactly the same as him, but the difference is unimaginably large. Nabos put his sword on his shoulder and said, "Just breath or force. On the battlefield, small differences can decide life or death. Wasting energy means dying right there. Besides, if you use mana, finding a weapon that suits you is necessary. Of course you don't understand, because it seems I still don't know how to use mana." After hearing what she said, Ronan's arm trembled. He asked again, "You can see that?" Nabos nodded. "Although I think your skill is fine like that, even though there is no mana in it, but one day you will have to use mana to fight. At least to control the power then, you must have your own weapon. You look like you're thinking too much. Come join my class, Ronan." Her words startled Ronan. "Okay." Nabos smiled. "Okay. Originally only a few second-year students and above were allowed to participate, but I allow you. But please bring a decent weapon to class, instead of that iron. This is a requirement to enter the classroom." That afternoon at a famous smithy. After listening to Ronan's explanation, Asel looked at the smithy's sign and nodded. "I understand, so Professor Nabos said so. So you came here on your first day off. At the smithy that Shile Effan introduced. When I gave you this order. But how should I put it? This place is a bit," Maria continued next to me. "It's too shabby, right? It feels like if you touch it it will collapse." Is this really the smithy he introduced to you in Grainshire? Even though he wasn't sure, Ronan had to nod. Maybe it was it. Just go inside and you'll know. Looking at the thick cobweb inside the smithy, everyone was stunned. What is this? Why is it even more messy inside? Ronan was a bit suspicious at this time. Strangely, he never lied before. At this time, the door in front had a hand sticking out, accompanied by an annoying voice, too loud, I was sleeping well. An animal with wolf-like claws appeared. He looked at Ronan and asked, "Who are you? Why was there such a fuss when it was morning? Didn't you see the lights go out?" Asel trembled and hid behind Ronan, but he only looked surprised for a moment. What an interesting scene. Werewolf in Star Forge. The other party was extremely upset. "Brat, are you deaf? I asked you why you came here. Do you intend to answer?" Ronan took out the order card and said, "What else can I do when I come to the smithy? Of course I came to buy weapons. Shile Effan introduced this place to me. He said the weapons here are extremely good." The werewolf looked at the cold card and pondered, the card of the Grainger family. Then it observed the spiritual energy of the three people. After a while, he coldly asked, "What do you want me to do? Just having a token doesn't mean you're a member of the Grainger family." Ronan didn't understand what the other person meant. He yawned loudly and waved his hand to dismiss the guests. "I don't know where the news came from. But go away, kid, I won't receive famous kids." Ronan was extremely upset. He frowned and wanted to confront him. But this guy suddenly changed his voice. He put on the look of a ferocious beast and said, "It's not all that I can do. If you let me tear off one of this skinny child's arms, I will consider it." Asel was scared when the opponent targeted him. His body trembled violently. The werewolf was amused. "I happened to be hungry, so I was generous." His fierce appearance made Asel sob. "I'm not good at all." The moment the werewolf got closer and closer, Ronan's eyes flashed with murderous intent. He coldly pulled out his sword and warned the opponent, "This wretched werewolf. You've crossed the limit." Saying that, he used the sword to stab the opponent's body. His face seemed like he still didn't understand the situation. The blow made the werewolf's body drag along the ground. After a while Ronan laughed. No wonder there was a strange stinging feeling. Where did that suddenly appear from? That armor. After being attacked by Ronan, the werewolf armor also appeared. But before waiting for him to answer, Ronan continued to walk forward. He appeared indifferent, but not very important. "Just destroy everything and be done." The scared werewolf begged. "Wait. Just taking a test." Ronan was startled and didn't understand what he was saying. The werewolf hastily explained, "In our smithy, the first step of the process is to test the skills of guests meeting for the first time. By chance, I wanted to test the transparent armor I had just crafted, so I intentionally attacked and angered him." "I have no intention of harming you," Ronan asked suspiciously. "This is such a strange excuse." "So you think I believe it?" The werewolf shook his head and continued to explain, "This is the smithy the Grainger clan trusts, so this inspection process is not strange at all. If you're still not sure, just go back and ask Shile Effan." Hearing this, Ronan's anger will calm down. He took back his sword and said uncomfortably, "This procedure almost caused a murder." The werewolf forced a smile and replied, "It's nothing like that, this time I went too far. But anyway, I'm sorry. If I scared you, please forgive me," he said, waving to Asel. "I don't eat people, so don't worry." Asel seemed to have suffered the shock and hid behind Maria. He forced a polite smile and replied, "I know, I'm lucky." Then the werewolf continued eloquently, "My name is Didakan, I'm just an apprentice at this smithy, but sometimes I'm also the janitor." "What are your names?" Ronan replied. "Ronan." Didakan nodded to show they understood. He asked again, "Did you come to buy weapons?" "I will lead you in, follow me, this is just our entrance. The real items are inside the machine." Not long after, everyone entered an empty room. After a while Didakan continued, everyone was in position. "Prepare yourself," he said, then pressed a secret brick on the wall. Didakan's voice was mixed with boasting. "You will see something wonderful," and then the ground under everyone's feet suddenly shook. Everyone looked at the sky at the same time, getting closer and closer. Didakan explained, "This is an elevator made from magic stone and pulleys. This is the fastest way to the main room of the smithy." Not long after, the other room appeared. Ronan was stunned. Looking inside, Didakan continued, "And this place is the best and largest forge of the kingdom, Grand Cappadocia." Ronan sobbed at the facilities here. He didn't expect there to be such a place. "In the basement, I didn't know what to say." Didakan was extremely pleased. "Look ahead, Ronan, you passed my test. I will be responsible for taking you to the best place in Grand Cappadocia, I mean go meet this kingdom's best artisan." Unexpectedly, underneath the citadel, there was such a large forge. Ronan also did not dare to believe the scene before his eyes. It was unbelievable. Didakan listened and nodded slightly. After all, the smithy only sold items to the royal family and nobles. No matter what, as long as they are skilled masters, they are all artisans of this smithy. However, the one who could be considered the best among them was the old dwarf who lived here. Of course he had 400 years of metallurgy experience. This old man is still quite stubborn, but his skills are second to none. Therefore, I respect him very much. Having said this, Didakan's face immediately became unusually happy. What are you doing? I bring guests to visit. Nearby, an old man with shaggy hair and beard was still focused on forging iron. Immediately after that, he immediately responded, loudly like this, it must have been Didakan, I told you to keep quiet when I work, why didn't you listen? Didakan immediately objected, knowing what to do, the front door was full of weapons so I couldn't open it. It's time to clean up, Mr. Dorone. The man immediately turned around and replied in a cold voice, you're still young and you're complaining so much. And you brought guests here, I guess they're not ordinary people. Didakan smiled, of course. Didakan pointed his thumb at Ronan again, then continued that I had tested him. His swordsmanship was quite good, surely if he saw it he would be very surprised. Dorone's eyes widened and he kept nodding, oh really, I didn't expect that. Looking at this appearance, turning around and looking at Ronan up and down, he looked like a kid. Please show me your swordsmanship, my eyes are very sharp. Ronan was startled and quickly replied, okay. Let me show you, then I pulled out the sword in my hand. But when he saw this sword of his, Dorone immediately showed a disdainful expression, oh my. Trash, do you always use a weapon like that, then use a hammer to break it into hundreds of pieces? This action immediately frightened Ronan, Maria and Asel. He couldn't hold back his anger and shouted loudly, wait, what are you doing, old man? But Dorone completely didn't care about what he said, just used the hammer to signal, over there. Another line appeared on the betting record, Kim Guangshik bet 1 month. I will also give you compensation, any sword you like, so don't worry about being disadvantaged. Because whichever sword you choose, it will be 100 times better than that piece of crap. Hearing this, your anger immediately disappeared, replaced by a skeptical attitude, really. Then he turned to look at Didakan again, but only saw him repeatedly nodding in response. Kim Minjun is seriously lift. Ronan did not hesitate, ran forward and picked up a shiny sword. This feeling was completely different from his old sword. But is there really that much of a difference? Still cautiously turned around and asked Dorone, could I really do that? If I accidentally broke something, it wouldn't be my fault. Dorone standing next to him nodded slightly in agreement, I don't care. So just do your best, just imagine yourself putting all your force into swinging the sword. Ronan remembered what happened, he took a deep breath, then. He held the sword tightly in his hand. His appearance immediately became unusually strong, murderous aura continuously radiating around. He was surprised and was no longer depressed. Could it be? Immediately afterwards, there was an earth-shattering explosion, attracting the attention of everyone nearby. What is that? It's old Dorone's place, it's only noon, has the smelter exploded? The wall in front of them immediately collapsed. Both Dorone and Ronan immediately froze. What happened just now? When Ronan heard that, he kept explaining, I didn't mean it. That technique belongs to Nabos, Dorone replied. Are you her apprentice? Ronan widened his eyes and asked again, do you know Professor Nabos? Dorone nodded slightly, of course he knew, I was the one who forged the sword for her. Professor's sword. Is it that stupid longsword? That's right. It's called a Rusa squash. It's one of my lifetime masterpieces. The platoon leader sat down first. Kim Minjun sat down as usual while thanking the platoon leader for his compliments. Honestly, I think it's nothing. Dorone smiled with satisfaction, that's what I had to say. I thought you were just a newbie, not yet aware of your own abilities. But it's been a long time since I've been able to meet a talent like you. It makes me feel so excited, I said and then punched him hard. Also because he was so talented, forging a sword that suited him was equally difficult. He saw that the sword had to work very hard to withstand his force. After thinking for a while, Ronan continued, so what should I do? Dorone explained again, ordinary materials cannot withstand your strength. We need to use high-grade metal, then melt it with fuel. Special material. At least we have to use Wyvern's byproducts. I don't know which one is better. The first time Ronan heard about these things, he couldn't hide his curiosity. Are they byproducts? Kim Minjun excitedly answered, 10. If I collect 10 certificates of merit, will I be able to get promoted? It's an eggshell. Dorone immediately froze, unable to believe that this hammer couldn't break it. There wasn't even a dent. Does such a material really exist in the world? He couldn't contain his curiosity and immediately asked again, can I really use that precious thing? Ronan didn't understand anything at all. He only hesitantly replied, okay, it's useless to me so to be. That's enough for me to forge a sword, right? Dorone firmly affirmed, of course, come back in 2 weeks. I will prepare for you, the best sword in this kingdom. Sergeant Kim Min-ji brought a box over as the platoon leader continued speaking, announcing before, the dungeon we will attack today is. As for you two, you're here anyway, let's meet the other artists, what about us? Dorone raised his voice and said loudly, I can't let your friend go home empty-handed, right? If they said they were introduced by me, they would take care of you. Someone's foot stepped on a dirty green water umbrella. Besides reforging this, there's nothing else I can do. Then he kept praising, the sound was so good, making the three Ronins stand there not knowing what to say. Is this old man crazy or not? Down below, the group of people dressed in white heard such loud sounds and became extremely angry. Those people were so noisy, they were so annoying. I want to burn them down so much. As soon as I finished speaking, a mysterious person nearby immediately reminded him, restrain yourself, it's not time for me to show my face. But not for long. From those stupid blacksmiths. This dungeon is really difficult. The two of them considered the situation and came to an agreement. A few days later, the ground is full of bones. The old man claimed to be the best blacksmith in the empire, saying he would forge his sword himself. Asel and Mario also placed other blacksmiths in this place. It seems like it will cost quite a bit, but that's not my problem. Because it's not my money, I remember the attitude of the two of them at that time when I said I would use this to pay. As expected, temple things are the best. If there were any problems, the sword would need half a month to be forged. Thinking of this, he sighed softly. In the meantime, what should I do to kill time? Maybe Asel and Mario are going to school now. After walking a little further, he stopped. Now that I remember, this is the place, the training area reserved for senior classes. Galileian Hall. That's probably where Professor Nabos teaches. I didn't want to come here before, but because she said I had to bring real weapons. But it's okay, now I have something to use temporarily. So should I come in? As soon as he finished speaking, Nabos appeared next to him like an escaped ghost, making Ronan immediately stunned. Teacher, Professor. Nabos reached out and pinched his ear. Neem replied in a loud voice, long time no see Ronan. I told you to come to class as soon as you have a weapon. Are you planning on truanting from school? Ronan quickly explained after hearing that. Why are you skipping school? There's no such thing. Fateh UK also coordinated smooth. I will listen to your reasons on the way. Ronan couldn't bear to keep begging. I understand. Let me go first. It hurts too much. This loud sound immediately attracted Adishawn's attention. What is that sound? Why was there a scream? At that moment, Carden came from behind and bumped into her. He angrily shouted, why is the teaching assistant so slow? Adishan quickly bent down to pick up the pile of documents that fell on the ground, then replied confusedly, sorry Carden, I was a bit absent-minded. If you have time to be absent-minded, go prepare the lesson plan. Okay, I'll go right away, Adishan replied softly. Then I stood up and turned around to leave. I'm leaving. Nabos quickly took Ronan to Combat Zone 1. During the duel on the first day of school, he was quite noisy, so some of you probably already knew him. But I will still recommend it again. This name is Ronan. From today he will be in the same class as you guys. Hearing this, Ronan immediately bent down and said loudly, I am Ronan, first year in the martial arts department. I hope my seniors will teach me more. As soon as the words ended, the crowd below immediately became excited. Is this the guy who got second place in the first year? That's right, that's why he got to skip this grade and that. It's so good, but at first glance it looks normal. After listening, Ronan could only force a smile. Inside he couldn't hide his anger. I heard everything you guys said. But I also met the person I wanted to meet. Naam Huk silently watched. Anyway, this will be fun. Immediately after that, the door behind him opened. Erzabet Akalusia quickly walked inside and said loudly, I'm sorry for being late. I have urgent work to complete. Ronan heard this familiar voice and immediately turned around. This person. Do you have to wait long? Nabos nodded slightly. It's okay, calm down and breathe again. I'm just introducing the new student. After listening, Adesha smiled slightly. This is the famous junior you mentioned, right? Nabos pointed at her, then said to Ronan, say hello, this is my teaching assistant. He heard that and turned around. Yes. Adishan bowed politely. Nice to meet you, Ronan. She is a second-year student in the martial arts department and is a teaching assistant in this class. Her name is Adishan. Then she reached out to shake his hand. Let's study well together. Choi Tae UK looked around and said, it looks like it's over, the rats are gone. Let's focus on searching a little more, Kim Minjun said to himself, The leader of the battlefield, with alertness and skillful leadership. Also known as, the Iron Lady, those under her command once said. What flows in Adishawn's veins is molten iron, not blood. Suddenly the ground moved. That commander-in-chief. Naam Huk looked down in panic. I can see that she doesn't have any memories, but is that really her true expression? So what happened to her at that time? After that, Ronan remembered what happened. Please tell me, just go get dressed, don't waste any more time. What should I do in the end, even though this is a big problem, but besides that, I will probably from now on. As expected, Adishan is very busy right now, come and see my posture. Okay, I will be there soon. Teaching assistant, the smell is strange, is there any other handkerchief? Excuse me, let me bring another one. After that, Addition was like a machine, busy all day at class. Here's a handkerchief, that's great, you two don't fight. And Ronan on the side also didn't expect it. Why is she so busy? She also does some odd jobs for servants. Is this what a teaching assistant is like? At this moment, Carden stepped forward again and took the initiative to speak. Hey first year, you look so bored. The platoon leader called out worriedly, Guangshik. Who are you? Why do you suddenly want to fight with me? After listening, Carden kept scratching his head in confusion. I'm so sudden, sorry. I'm Carden Awun, a third-year student. I heard a lot about you in that duel at the beginning of school. If the rumors are true, then I also want to learn from you in this match. Ronan immediately refused, but now I have something to think about. Let's fight later. Carden nodded slightly. Okay, I forgot. Really, how could I forget to bring a weapon when I wanted to fight with you? Then he immediately turned around and said to Addition with an impolite attitude, Hey you idiot, bring my practice spear. After hearing that she quickly replied, Okay Carden, I'll bring it right here. When Ronan heard this, his face immediately changed. What, you idiot? How dare this bastard call her like that? But Carden doesn't understand why Ronan is suddenly like that. Addition quickly brought a spear. Here it is. Carden saw it and shouted loudly, What is this? You idiot, why did you bring a long spear? Haven't I changed to a short spear a long time ago? Addition immediately became confused. Is that so? Sorry Carden, because in the previous class you still used spears long should be. But he just kept smirking. Look how cool it is. How dare you disobey me? What kind of teaching assistant doesn't know anything? After saying that, he slammed the spear down on Addishawn's head. From the beginning, you were not qualified to study in this class. I was able to get in because I begged the professor, so I had to know my destiny. Don't you know what tiger kindness is? Addition heard this and could only patiently admit his fault. Sorry Carden, I will pay more attention. The two of them were under the monster as if preparing to be attacked by it when Minjun was able to fly. What's wrong Ronan? Why are you interrupting? Ronan just said coldly, Let's do it senior, what you just said. Otherwise I don't know what I would do now. Carden frowned. What nonsense are you talking about? Ronan clutched the spear in his hand and shouted loudly, Don't you understand what I'm saying? Let's fight, you bastard. The atmosphere suddenly became tense. Carden suppressed his anger and asked again, a little embarrassed. But am I hard of hearing? Why do you suddenly not like it anymore? Could it be, you behave like that because of her, because you know her? Or just act like dirty cowards? What did you two do to each other, without telling me? Ronan couldn't hear these words so he shouted loudly, Hey! Shut up and focus on blocking. Unless you want to die then keep talking. Ronan's murderous attitude and lightning-fast movements caused Carden to suddenly lose control. He clenched his teeth and gums, trying to resist Ronan's attack. What the hell? Why is it still so strong without mana? Immediately after that, Carden was pushed away. A large crack appeared on Ronan's sword. You pointed the tip of your sword at Carden, constantly warning. All day long you kept talking, saying you didn't want to use the spear, so I changed it for you. Do you like it? As soon as the words ended, the spear in Carden's hand immediately broke in half. His eyes were bloodshot and he shouted angrily, How dare you bastard! You didn't know your identity, then frantically took the spear and rushed towards Ronan. Do you think you can leave here unharmed? Ronan did not show any signs of fear. He stood there continuously staring at Carden. Just as the tip of the spear touched his face, it seemed to be under the influence of a supernatural force, quickly breaking into many small pieces, causing Carden to freeze without saying a word. That's right, I think I'll be fine. So, just take care of yourself first. As soon as he finished speaking, Carden was sent flying by Ronan's blow. Ronan hit him in the face, then his ribs. Then swung the sword again. Give him a fatal blow. Carden was completely defeated and immediately fell to the ground. Ronan glared at him and reminded you, You should feel lucky because this is an academy, if I meet you outside. So now you have lost your life, do you understand? Seeing this scene, the students there couldn't help but be surprised. How did Carden lose? He is in the top third-year academy. Ronan heard it and turned around. Now it was his turn. A few young men forced her to bring a handkerchief, quickly step out, and then he raised his sword and pointed it at the group of three of them. The man with curly blonde hair was startled when he heard it. What am I doing? If it stinks, go wash it yourself. Why bother others? You think the commander-in-chief, I mean, the teaching assistant is my servant. As soon as the words finished, he was so scared that he cried and didn't dare move. Ronan basically felt that they were too aggressive, so he had to take action directly. Come here, I will kill all of you innocent nose squeakers. Addition heard that and immediately stopped you. Wait, stop, Ronan. Then I put my hand in front of him. I don't know why he did that, but I'm really okay. But Ronan just quietly replied, the teaching assistant, please stand aside, I can ignore anyone, except those idiots who treated you like that. I can't stand by and watch her suffer. At least in this kingdom. You shouldn't be treated like that. After saying that, he immediately stepped forward and placed his hand on her shoulder. She moved away. I didn't intend to stop until I gave them a good beating. At this moment Nabos immediately spoke and stopped. Stop it, Ronan. As soon as he finished speaking, countless green breaths flew to cover him. I won't hold you responsible for the last battle, because in real life there are no shortage of such accidents. But if you cause a bigger problem, I won't be able to close my eyes and let it go. Put down the sword and step back. Ronan's hands suddenly trembled, the aura emitted was so terrible, making his body unable to move. That is, after saying that he slowly turned his head. Is it a snake? Then behind him, a green snake with bright yellow eyes was sticking out its tongue and pointing its cunning teeth at him. Could this be Professor Nabos's aura? The peerless swordsmith. Then she continued, Ronan, what you are doing cannot be considered a competition, is the person in charge of this class. I will not allow any more violations. Ronan was not convinced and immediately objected. Thinking back, she could not have known that her teaching assistant was being treated unfairly like that. Even so, she still stood aside and let it happen. It was between the two of us, not your problem. So this will be the last time I warn you, stop now. The two people's eyes became sharp at the same time, full of murderous intent. But this makes Ronan hold the sword in his hand even tighter, despite the great pressure from Nabos that hinders him, whether she is a peerless swordsmith or not. My answer will still not change. Go away, Nabos calmly replied, then there's no way. Van was jealous, then performed a move, ordering the giant snake to attack Ronan. His face immediately sweated, remembering even more what had happened. Commander-in-Chief, I once asked you, why did you volunteer to take on the position of commander, which everyone wants to refuse? And she just replied, one day you will understand, there are things you cannot force others to do. That was fate, she answered. What were you thinking at that time? What is the thing you carry on your shoulders? Ronan, I'm really sorry. People must carry this burden. Don't forgive me. As soon as the words ended, Ronan also woke up in reality. He jumped up in panic and shouted, no. He still hasn't stopped panicking. At this moment a gentle voice said, what's wrong, Ronan? Are you having a nightmare? Ronan immediately realized. Her commander-in-chief. Commander. Adishan widened his eyes and asked again, Commander-in-chief, what do you mean? Hearing this, Ronan suddenly startled. While scratching his head, he quickly explained, it's nothing. But yes, this is the clinic. Adishan nodded slightly, yes, the professor told me to bring you here and also. The professor said he would correct my behavior today in the supplementary class. That's what she said. Ronan gulped softly, the movie's over. Should I faint again? His sigh immediately attracted the curious Adishan next to him. But by the way, Ronan. Before, you were angry because they treated me like that. When you heard it, your face turned red. Turned his face away, acting cold. Because I care a little too much about manners, and I'm also an upright gentleman, you must be shy to talk about it. Adishan smiled slightly. Immediately after that his eyes became sad again. Not only Carden, please don't hate the others too. Because I also understand how they feel, when they treat me like that. Ronan couldn't believe his ears. What? I mean, how can you say that if you already know everything? How can you still work so hard as a teaching assistant? Before, I wondered why you did that. Now I don't understand even more why you continue to do those things. Isn't it strange? The professor already knew that everyone treated her like that. It was all obvious in the lessons, so it couldn't be said that she didn't know. I can't understand why she turns a blind eye to such injustices. This is something I really don't understand, whether or not the academy is intentionally covering up for those nobles. You're not angry at all when they treat you like that. Adishan smiled slightly. If that's what you mean, then I hope you don't misunderstand the professor's reason for doing that. Because I told her to do so. As if Ronan didn't hear clearly, he asked incredulously, sorry, what are you talking about? That's because I like to have privileges that I don't deserve. First you have to reach the level of an expert. About swordsmanship, only then can you learn in that class. But even after studying for a year, I can only control basic mana. You can't believe your ears. What? There was no way the previous commander could have used that huge amount of aura. There was a time when she was like that. Adishan explained again, so I privately asked the professor to turn a blind eye no matter how the students treated me. Because I don't want to be a burden to her, when she accepted me as a teaching assistant. While I was enjoying that privilege, of course I had to pay the price, by suffering like this. But don't worry, I can still handle this. After saying that, I clenched my hands tightly, looking extremely determined. But still thank you for what you did today. Originally, I thought I was used to ordinary things. But today I was a little touched by what you did. By the way, what is your reason for enduring these things? Just because he wanted to become the general commander of the army. Adishan was so surprised that he covered his mouth tightly. How did he know? It was so obvious. That's true, but I'm not sure yet, so I can't say for sure. But my dream is to become the commander of this empire. As soon as she finished speaking, she looked extremely confused, because she thought she was promoting herself. Of course I know this might sound a bit too much, coming out of the mouth of someone who hasn't yet reached the expert level. Even so, I'm still not planning to give up. Maybe you don't believe it, but I'm quite confident in my understanding of technology and tactics in the military. To achieve that dream, I'm trying every day. Then she opened her rough, calloused hands and spoke with a cheerful attitude. Well, it's time for the next class. Ronan, you have to rest well before going back there, do you understand? He nodded slightly jokingly. Yes, I understand. Thank you for keeping an eye on me, senior. No problem, then I'll see you in class next time. After Adishan left, Ronan became thoughtful. Remembering your advice in the future, Corporal Ronan, if you see me again, could you tell me that instead of wasting my time pointlessly, I should just do some sewing? I've done everything, but I've never done it. What to do now? What do you want me to do? Commander. Time passed quickly. A few days later, it was already the weekend. Ronan went as scheduled to the entrance of the Grand Cappadocia smithy. What is it that he called us here for? But there's no one here. Remembering last night, after hearing a knock on the glass door behind him, Ronan immediately turned away, not knowing what was wrong with him, but sent carrier pigeons at midnight like that. Even though he said it was a masterpiece he had created, I thought it would take a while to complete, but I didn't think it would be that fast. When he arrived, there was no one there. He was busy doing business. Right after that, he bumped into a cavalry helmet. Because he was angry, he kicked it straight away. Why are there so many things blocking the way? Have you never cleared them? Is this really how you guys receive guests? Both Asel and Maria also noticed this difference. Why has he been so sensitive these past few days? I can't help it. Did something happen in class that made him angry with me? Standing here will only make you more tired. Let's go inside. At this point, Maria couldn't stand it anymore, so she ran to stop him. Wait, do you really think you can do everything you want? Ronan listened and just calmly said, he's the one who told us to come. First, what should you be afraid of? You two stop talking and follow me. Let's see what he's doing in there. He must have pressed here before. After speaking, he raised his hand to press a small brick on the wall. Right after the floor collapsed, he nodded slightly. That's right. Asel immediately signaled to Maria, will it be okay? Then who can stop this lunatic? Ronan rubbed his neck while grumbling, an old man who doesn't even know basic customer service. What else can you do? Let me go down there and see if I see him. As soon as they got there, a terrible scene appeared before the three of them. The whole forge was engulfed in flames. What was going on here? The corpses of blacksmiths appeared everywhere. Asel pointed in the distance in horror. Ronan looked. A stone giant. The blacksmiths are being chased by the stone giant. How could that thing appear here? It seems like they will catch them soon. What should we do, Ronan? We can't let those blacksmiths get into trouble. Ronan tried to take a deep breath to calm himself, then wrapped his arms around Asel's waist. No more questions, leave it to me. She was so surprised that she froze, and Ronan was about to jump down. It took a while for Asel to realize the current situation. Maria, you will cover the rear, go find someone to help. We will go there first, you receive orders to act immediately, okay? Okay. As for Asel, let's go down, then immediately jump into the sea of fire there. Using magic to slow down gravity, and stealth magic when we jump down, Asel tries to perform the move, Invisible Hand. The stone giant quickly caught up with the remaining blacksmiths. They were also afraid and their legs were weak, they could no longer walk. No. Is everything over? The stone giant raised his hands, preparing to finish him off. Ronan rushed forward and used his sword to amputate both of its arms, luckily just in time. I've had a lot of trouble these past few days, so my mind is a bit frustrated. You guys picked the wrong day to start trouble with me, you stupid rocks. Then his eyes flashed with a terrifying murderous aura. But it did not give up, immediately regrew its hand and attacked Ronan. Just as the fist approached, Ronan just stood there calmly. He turned around as quickly as lightning, running all over the giant body of the stone giant. Slash it across its body, then its head. The rock lost control and immediately collapsed, creating a loud earth-shattering noise. That kid was Daron's new guest yesterday. I didn't expect that someone so young could defeat a stone giant with just one move. At this time, Ronan slowly approached. Uncle. What the hell is going on here? Please explain to me quickly. Then the two of them quickly told Ronan what had happened. He couldn't believe his ears. Was it true? Dozens of giant stone men suddenly attacked the crowd here. The other man nodded slightly. Yes, we don't know why either. They suddenly emerged from the ground, then destroyed everything they saw. All they do is hunt blacksmiths. They even captured the drone, then returned from where they emerged. Although Dedekan tried to capture them, he was not good at fighting, so he was helpless to let things happen. Ronan's face flashed with worry. If this continues, they will become their food. Okay now, there aren't any left here, right? That's right, the one you just hit is the last one. Ronan turned to tell Asel. He and Maria went to check if the others were injured, until the reinforcements arrived. If you find anyone, treat them. Having a Sita with you is enough first aid. Asel couldn't hide her worry. What about you, what do you think? Ronan replied, I have to go save the captives. Because there's something I have to get from old Daron. On Daron's side right now, the situation is extremely tense. I'm glad you came to save me, but you don't need to come here. Daron said to Dedekan. Even though his body was full of injuries, he remained silent without saying a word. Soon the number of stone giants increased. Dedekan quickly told Daron to run away, but with invisible armor he could. Before he could finish his sentence, Dedekan turned around and shouted, Shut up old man, I'm tired of dealing with this group of people, stop standing there talking nonsense. If you still have the strength to babble, then pick up that sword or do something, but is that sword for show? Daron frowned and replied bluntly, No way. This kid is my masterpiece, my grand beginning. I can't tarnish it. Dedekan is speechless, you old psycho. No matter how crazy you are about weapons, now is not the time to do these things. As soon as the words fell, the stone giants attacked even more fiercely. In that moment, Dedekan quickly rushed forward to block its attack. Daron couldn't help but shout loudly, Dedekan. Dedekan clenched his teeth and gums, using all his strength to block that kicking fist. Even the protective spells on the armor were destroyed. Damn it, if I had known how I would die, I would have created everything I could. At this moment, the figure of a young man, as fast as lightning, quickly rushed forward, as Dedekan was saying his regrets. He rushed forward and quickly took care of the person attacking Dedekan and Daron. When Dedekan saw this scene, he continuously sweated and froze on the spot. Ronan landed on the ground, gently stroked the sword in his hand and continued, Good Dedekan, take a rest. Daron quickly ran to help Dedekan with surprised eyes, Ronan. How did you get here? You must have met many giants on the way. After hearing this, you just smiled slightly, oh those bastards. I eliminated them while saving the other blacksmiths. Dedekan couldn't hide his surprise. What, how did you do it? Stop talking. Give me that, old Daron, because I can't use this sword anymore. That thing you call a masterpiece, isn't it my sword? Do you think I can't hear anything from outside? Daron was dumbfounded for a moment before replying, Oh yes, here you are. Take it, the sheath is not yet complete so you can use it right away. Ronan smiled slightly, thanked you, then he quickly pulled out his sword. Then we are. Let's check it out and see how good it is. The stone giants quickly turned their attack to Ronan. One of them opened his large hands, preparing to hold him tightly. He only needed to make one swing of the sword, creating a dazzling light, causing the giants to freeze immediately. Immediately afterwards, a terrible force of power quickly swept through, destroying the entire group of stone men. In the surprise of Ronan and Dedekan, Daron appeared extremely satisfied. What the hell is this? Daron excitedly ran to wait for the answer. How do you feel? Do you like La Mancha? Ronan asked again with skepticism, Is that the name of the sword? That's the name I got from observing the stars. My beloved star. Isn't it amazing? It was so light that he couldn't feel the weight of the sword, but it was stronger than mithril, and could withstand any kind of swordsmanship. On top of that I didn't add any spells in it, but because it has the ability to absorb blood. So it possesses very unique self-regenerating and recovery properties. Ronan also realized something, this is made from Sita Ha. But I couldn't help but praise him, he was much better than I thought. Daron kept laughing loudly. Luckily he liked it. Dedekan listened softly and reminded him, now is the time to gossip. Quickly get out of here, when you get here, there will be no one left, so why is the timing right? You take that old man out first, I have something to check. Dedekan's eyes widened, why check? Well, it's not much, but I think. There are some rats hiding here. And there is something very big. Dedekan curiously asked again, are the rats dirty? What do you mean? Ronan nodded slightly, are the creatures trying to hinder me? I'm quite familiar with the behavior of stone giants, they don't travel in herds, and they will lie quietly like that unless provoked. Furthermore, after saying that, he immediately went to place his hands on those large stone statues. I've never seen it either. There were suspicious drawings like this on the back of their heads. As soon as they finished speaking, a magic circle appeared on the rock. Do you know what kind of magic this is? Daron looked for a long time and then shook his head slightly. I'm not sure, I'm not very good in this field, so I can't say anything. But the amount of mana still remaining here is too much. It can be said that it is quite a cunning magic. The stone giants became aggressive for sure because of this. Who could do such a cruel thing? Ronan replied, I can accept it too. But wait, it could be. We'll know who's behind this if we go deeper. Having said that, he firmly held the sword in his hand and rushed into the dark tunnel. At first I was hesitant about this, but the more I followed the footsteps of the stone giants deeper into the cave, then I saw more human footprints. Furthermore, the mana stone sensor is showing signs of caution. Someone is ahead. He realized the presence of a stranger and immediately turned away. There's a voice coming from behind the corner. Let's see who you people are. After speaking, I cautiously leaned closer to observe. But the next scene made Ronan even more unable to believe his eyes. What is this? Inside is a tall stone giant standing in front of a group of mysterious white-clothed people. Surely those people are the culprits. But what is that thing? Compared to the size of the stone giants from before, it's just like a child. It seemed like it was sealed, but once that thing moved. At this moment, the voice inside rang out again. Was someone intruding here? Are you sure? I am sure, according to the eraser marks on each cut stone giant. It could only have been done by a third party. After hearing that, the man frowned. How could these bastards move here so quickly? What should we do now? You said there are no more stones left, so how can we awaken this thing, then? Should I kill them all? Hearing these words, the girl next to her immediately shook her head in protest. Forget it, Edion. Since most of the facilities were destroyed, the Empire's weapon creation technology has degraded a lot already. In other words, if our identity is revealed, that person will definitely not leave it alone. I should retreat first. Teu Edion smiled softly. Are you always so serious, Cirilla? It's just as you like. At least let me handle that. You can do whatever you want. This sulfur smell. These words suddenly made Ronan startled. Edion kept smiling manically, making my nose itch. Die, that rat, he said, then performed a move like burning fire towards Ronan. He knew he was exposed, so he stepped out. The fire immediately created an earth-shattering explosion. Edion smirked, truly an uninvited guest. Who are you, brat? Thanks to Ronan's timely reaction, he was able to block this attack. Seeing that he didn't answer, Edion continued, but he barely avoided the fire that just happened. So it's probably quite strong. Let me tie your legs up first. After speaking, I continued to cast a huge red fire towards you. Ronan couldn't help but be surprised. With this way of instantly casting spells, they were certainly not ordinary people. After finishing, he slowly approached and asked again, now let me ask you again. How can anyone get in here? This place can't be in and out easily like that. Ronan took the sword and stuck it in the ground, slowly stood up with difficulty. I am the one who should ask you those words. Who exactly are you? But no matter who you are, you probably already know the outcome when you come here. After listening, Edion slowly smiled with satisfaction. That's right, it has to be like that. That kind of attitude is worth killing, don't you think so, Cirilla? But you don't care about these things at all, just be gentle. Reminder, don't waste any more time. After listening, he grinned and smirked. Just enjoy having fun while you can, there's not much time left. The day this kingdom was buried under starlight. These words immediately made Ronan speechless. The things he said were words you could never forget. What did you just say? You spout those words, but do you know what they mean, you trash rats? Edion saw this scene. His face also showed a hint of worry. What is this? Suddenly his aura. Ronan replied, both of you will have to come with me. Because it seems like I need to interrogate you a lot. To Edion, these words are ridiculous. This brat has lost his mind. You still want to arrest us? Hey brat, do you think you have that ability? After saying that, he raised his hand to prepare to perform the move. Unexpectedly, Ronan quickly rushed forward and cut off his arm, then coldly replied, I think it is there. But there are many other things. So if you're smart, just lie there quietly. Immediately after that, Edion fell to the ground, his face turned pale, and he did not say another word. And when Cirilla saw this scene, she stood there dumbfounded. Edion didn't even have time to act. Before she could react, Ronan reached out and squeezed her neck. Continuously giving warnings, ladies, from now on, please be obedient and answer me. Unless you want to have your arm chopped off like that guy. Unless you want your hand chopped off like that guy. Ronan said as he squeezed Cirilla's neck hard. She tried her best to push him away, then cast a magic shield. Ronan raised his hand to stop him and then glanced at her slightly, understanding, so she didn't want to give up that easily, right? The magic shield, it's quite sturdy, but even so. Immediately after that, he used a move, tearing apart Cirilla's protective shield in her surprise. She was so scared that her face turned pale, she couldn't say another word. How could he cut her defensive magic shield? Ronan rushed forward and stabbed her in the chest, causing the Cirilla to continuously squirt out fresh blood. Oh look, you're a half-demon. A half-demon accompanied by a scoundrel magician. Who exactly are you people? At this moment, Egeon from behind grew a jagged arm like a wooden trunk. He performed a violent explosion and then frantically controlled it towards Ronan. He quickly turned around. Destroy the large fire in front of you. Looking to the side, I only saw the stone giant standing silently. Ronan seemed to understand everything. He continued in a cold voice, that's really strange. I thought I cut off one of your arms. What the hell is going on? With the, is that your disgusting appearance? Egeon frantically shouted, stay away from her, you depraved bastard. Ronan quickly pointed his sword at Egeon. He also prepared a new move. It seemed like he still didn't understand the current situation, so he stabbed the circler's leg once more. Seeing that, Egeon became even more impatient. He gritted his teeth and frowned continuously. Ronan replied harshly, you guys made me so angry, now it's all over. He stabbed the sword harder into the Cirilla's stomach and then made a condition, decided, will you shut up and follow me? Or choose to let me perform another arm amputation with this half-demon girl, and I'm also quite curious about whether she can regrow her arms like you. When Egeon heard this, he could only obediently put his magic back and replied, okay, I will follow you, that's a good choice. I also don't want to see any more bloodshed, I said and quickly pulled the sword out of Cirilla's body, causing her to scream uncontrollably. But at the same time, he warned her that if she died, it would be very troublesome. At this moment, he noticed something unusual about her, but wait, what's wrong with her? I just saw Cirilla lying on the ground continuously smiling crazy, why is she smiling in this situation? Immediately after that, the giant's hands approached Ronan. He was a bit startled, since when? He quickly raised his sword to block this blow. Thanks to that, the impact force was significantly reduced, but it was still pushed quite a distance, hitting the large rocks there, creating an earth-shattering explosion. Egeon then quickly ran closer. Cirilla, are you okay? I'm fine, this time I owe you my life, she said and quickly pressed her hand hard to stop the bleeding in the wound and sat up. If you don't pretend to attack, to attract his attention, then I don't have time to cast spells, blurring his perception. Also activating this giant. I only activated its arm a little, but that guy is definitely seriously injured. Egeon nodded slightly. Cirilla, you should go to the church first and report this situation. I'll finish off that bastard here to avoid trouble. Cirilla nodded slightly. Be careful. That guy is a beast in the form of a child. Egeon reassured her. I won't let my guard down anymore. That lesson is more than enough. He is not a child lacking combat experience. If I don't kill him now, he will definitely become a big threat. And Ronan on this side was also slowly standing up in the rubble. Egeon guessed part of it, so he was even more careful. He couldn't lose sight of him anymore. But he didn't expect that he would have his arms and legs cut off. He kept screaming in pain, then died on the spot. Ronan took a deep breath. She asked in a harsh voice, where do you think you're going? I told you before. I have a lot of things I want to ask you. Cirilla was so scared that her face turned pale and she froze on the spot. How could you still survive after being so seriously injured? She said, panicking and casting the magic circle. Ronan dragged his trembling body step by step closer, then said harshly, I will never. Where can you escape? As soon as he finished speaking, he fell to one knee, as if he had lost the ability to control himself. He kept clenching his teeth and gums. I couldn't control my body anymore. Cirilla on this side also kept thinking, why did the situation get so bad? I'm so uncomfortable, there's so much blood flowing, but since I have no chance of winning in this battle, then it's even better. Prioritize reporting this matter to superiors. Then she tried to calm herself and said loudly, mentally preparing herself. I will find everything that belongs to you, and take it all away forever. Whether it's your lover's family or your friends, the lives of all of them. Ronan remained silent without saying a word. No, I finally found some clues. I can't let her get away so easily like this. Otherwise, everything will end up like that time again. Ronan raised his hand in despair, stood there, and could only watch as the Cirilla's figure grew farther and farther away. I told you to stop. As soon as the words finished, extremely strong killing currents appeared around him, followed by a familiar voice saying, yes, stop there. This made Cirilla so scared that she didn't dare take another step. I also have a lot of things I want to ask you. Ronan couldn't believe his ears. The person who came was Professor Nabos. First let me confirm this. Human, right? Who dares to provoke my disciple? I've heard all the details. It's true that something big happened. Seeing that, Ronan smiled slightly. She really came at the right time. Professor Nabos, nice to meet you. I didn't expect to see you here. Nabos still kept her cold attitude as always and replied, still talking like that, looks like you're still healthy. And now, Let's deal with that first. Cyrilla's body suddenly trembled, her whole body completely paralyzed under those predatory python-like eyes. Don't tell me it was her. Why was she here? No, I have to quickly escape from here. Before she could react, Nabos rushed forward and squeezed her mouth hard. Questioning harshly, you have done many things that should not have been committed, but the thing that angers me the most. It was you who dared to touch my student. Cyrilla was so scared that her face turned pale and she didn't even dare to look directly into Nabos' eyes. What can you look forward to? The future is wide open before my eyes. Then she pulled the Cyrilla's face closer to the giant green python. She let out a scream of pain, then her eyes quickly closed. Falling on the ground, I'm sorry, O star. Seeing this, Ronan quickly came closer to observe. Nabos sighed softly, you've worked hard. After treating the wound, we will privately inform the principal about this. Before he could finish his sentence, Ronan asked again, Professor, about the future you mentioned earlier. By any chance are you talking about Rhodolan prison? That's it, so I already know about that place, but why ask? Ronan didn't say anything more, just thought to himself, it's just like I thought. Rhodolan's Screaming Fortress is a prison located in the middle of the sea. A place to detain criminals against the Empire, famous for its brutal interrogation methods, ready to use anything to make prisoners confess, if that's the case. Then please, Professor, allow me to participate in her interrogation. Nabos frowned slightly. What are you talking about? That's not where I am. Ronan immediately held her hand tightly, constantly begging, just once, please, Professor. This is very important to me. After hearing that, Nabos just widened her eyes in surprise. Aid from this side also quickly arrived to rescue the injured. There were many blacksmiths who were seriously injured. Others are in better condition. Maria now dared to breathe a sigh of relief. It seemed everything had been resolved. Isn't that right, Asel? You and Sita only showed a haggard look after listening, then kept nodding. Yes, that's really lucky. Then he looked extremely worried. Ronan should have returned early. What happened? You guys called me. Maria, Asel, the two of them turned around in surprise. Then I saw Ronan smiling and waving. Just as I was walking up I heard my name. You three did a great job. I also heard that when Maria brought reinforcements, Asel and Sita had rescued more than half of the blacksmiths buried underground. Is anyone injured? Maria frowned slightly. We should have asked that question. Why do you look so devastated? You're injured all over your body. Asel couldn't hold back her tears, gently raised the Sita towards Ronan. Quickly go and bandage it. Ronan listened and just waved his hand repeatedly. No need, I've already treated the wound. You rest first. Having said that, he immediately turned back. Further, it turned out that both Eduon and Cyrilla fainted and were captured by them. I still have things to take care of first. A few hours later they were there, the rendezvous point to take the prisoners to Rhodolan, which was at the cliff in the Grunno forest. Nabos immediately recognized the sound of footsteps. They arrived, immediately followed by the loud sound of a giant falcon. Escort team from Rhodolan. After landing, the mysterious person quickly walked down. Respectfully, hello Miss Nabos. We received a summons from the Empire to escort prisoners. It's them, right? That's right. This man has a very strange healing ability. Remember to keep that in mind when interrogating. After hearing this, the person wearing the bird mask replied meaningfully, oh, is that so? Our interrogator will surely be very happy. It's been a while since I received an interesting toy like this. After that, they quickly picked up the Eduon and Cyrilla and turned to leave, so we asked permission to go first. We will contact you when the interview is over. I hope you will continue to strive for the peace of the Empire. As soon as the words ended, the giant bird and the small prison cart quickly flew up. Wait until they leave Nabos before continuing. It usually takes about a week for Rhodolan to pry open their mouths. When they contact me, I will let you know, so you can prepare to leave when the time comes. There's no need for anything else, right? Ronan next to him nodded slightly. Yes, Professor. As soon as he finished speaking, Nabos quietly left there as quickly as flying on a gust of wind. The time that followed passed very quickly. The process of remodeling Cappadocia went very smoothly, with the support of the Empire. I also went back to school, and spent time taking supplementary courses from professors. Just like that for the next few days. Creator Rhodolan's Screaming Fortress. Screams of pain and suffering continued throughout the day and night. With all kinds of different torture tools. Damn, I was so involved that I almost forgot. Isn't it about time? Guests visit the stars. Nabos and Ronan also quickly arrived at Rhodolan Fortress. They have already arranged people to wait there. Hello everyone. Everyone must have had a hard time traveling. I am the examiner in charge of this prisoner, and the person who will accompany you too. My name is Karaka. Do you two want to meet the prisoner? Nabos replied, yes, I will listen to the interrogation on the way. Okay then, please follow me. But Ronan feels like something's not right. It's strange, I didn't expect Rhodolan's Inquisitor to have such a handsome old gentleman. Nabos sighed softly. To be honest, I didn't believe it either. The first time I met him, everyone said that. But don't look at my face and get confused, you'll find out soon enough. The reason why that old man, called the worst nightmare, Karaka opened the door. Lead the two of them along the prison corridor to Edion and Cyrilla, the cell is right in front, so I'll talk about the main point first. Firstly, it must be said that, as I thought, they came from that place, the Clagia Nebula, they are members of that organization. Nabos asked again, this is the first time I heard this name. A criminal organization similar to Carabollo, yes, but I think they are much more dangerous, because their identities are extremely mysterious. From the fire that swept through the Nalanda granary, to the explosion at the Eatmen Technical Research Headquarters, who was behind the serious unexplained incidents that occurred last year. I was able to confirm that it was them who did it. After hearing this, Ronan couldn't help but feel scared and evil. I had never heard of this organization in my previous life. In the report I presented the details, Karaka replied again. Ronan couldn't help but ask, the examiner. Do they mention anything like starlight, or about the appearance of stars? After hearing that, Karaka's eyes widened in surprise. This was the first time I heard those words. Ronan kept scratching his face in confusion, trying to say something else to distract them. I just overheard it while chasing those bastards. Karaka nodded slightly. He held the bird-faced hat tightly in his hand and spoke in a cold voice, seemingly related to their purpose. That is, do you know? But Karaka's current appearance. It completely sent chills down Ronan's spine. What is this? Why is he suddenly emitting murderous aura? Karaka quickly put on his hat and replied, I understand. Having said that, he took out a small switch and turned it on. It was so embarrassing. Just the first time we met, I had to let you guys see this scene. It seems like my heart hasn't reached our friends yet. I had to show a little sincerity. As soon as the door opened, Ronan completely couldn't believe his eyes. That is, the guys I met the other day. Why are they like this? Karaka said again, Edion is indeed interesting. He continuously regenerates his body with the unique power of dark magic. Do you know what is the best way to get along with this type of person? It's simpler than you think, just poke and stab until he can't regenerate anymore. Then Karaka picks up a tool with a small red-hot tip. Pressing it straight into Edion's chest, diligently peeling off every piece of his meat with all sincerity. As soon as the words ended, Edion continuously screamed in pain. After that, Karaka seemed extremely happy, showing him off like his masterpiece. Just like that, we became close. That's what I think. Ronan and Nabos looked at the red-hot iron bar in front of them without saying another word. But I didn't expect that he was still hiding it. You really disappointed me, Edion. Nabos turned to look at Ronan in confusion, unable to tell. Yes, this sometimes happened to soldiers with secrets on the battlefield. To prevent the enemy from knowing the secret, they will cast a seal on those soldiers. I don't know if these bastards are in that case. Karaka suddenly spoke up in response. Oh my god, it's so embarrassing. The guilt of being betrayed overwhelmed me, making me forget that possibility. You two, please wait a moment. After listening, the two of them just silently watched Karaka leave. I need to go get something. A few minutes passed. The thing Karaka brought immediately made the two of them feel goosebumps. He said it was this. This ugly thing, this is a wonderful eye, it can eat away the curse. When interrogating Brahmins who cannot speak due to curses, this precious item is very useful. Then he quickly brought it in front of Edion. You try it first. Edion felt bad, so he wanted to stop him. Wait for this. But before he could react, that beautiful eye was firmly attached to his face. I will free you soon, so my friend, just eat to your heart's content. Immediately after that, Edion continuously heard miserable screams. After the eyes of the great eye glowed, Karaka asked again, done, I ask you again. The appearance of stars is stars. Edion's eyes quickly became dull. Because the stars are an eternal existence, the only blessing that can save the weak in this land. We always look forward to the day when the stars appear. The stars go far beyond this time and space. Cyrilla was startled when she heard that. Our mission is to destroy everything that stands in our way. Cyrilla couldn't ignore it anymore, so she quickly shouted, no, shut up Edion. Karaka seemed impatient. For an old person like me, that's too long. In short, something is about to fall from the sky, right? What is that? Edion opened his eyes wide and replied, Children of the stars. Roan suddenly clenched his hands. His face flashed with tension, as if he also realized something. It was a Hayute. He walked straight towards Edion. Karaka saw that and quickly stopped him. Mr. Ronan. This. Star children, do you mean a Hayute? Edion widened his eyes and remained silent for a while without saying anything else. Immediately after that, he raised his head and shouted loudly, "Ahayute." His eyes became bloodshot, blood continuously flowed out. "How can you mention it?" That name, as soon as the words left his face changed as if he had been stung by a bee, and his voice could not hide the indignation. Ronan was immediately scared to death at this scene. What was going on? It wasn't until Karaka came and patted him hard on the shoulder that he suddenly realized what was going on. "Please step back." He stepped forward and cast the magic circle. Edion's body immediately became glowing. In just a short time of sniffing, he was crushed into hundreds of pieces by the power inside. Karaka's protection just in time protected the two of them. Fresh blood splattered everywhere. Oh my god. It was truly unexpected, even when the curse was absorbed by the eyes. He still transformed into this form. On the ground only small pieces of black meat were visible, smoking. Is this really what the sealing curse is? Although we have seen this scene often, cases this serious are very rare. It seems they are strictly forbidden from doing two things. One is not to reveal anything about the appearance of stars to people who are not members of the organization, but Cyrilla, after hearing such pitiful sounds from Edion, was scared to the point of trembling. Up and down. Karaka spoke again, and when they mentioned any word related to that person, it would result in an explosion, so this was probably the second taboo. After speaking, he walked over and lightly tapped Ronan's shoulder and asked softly, "So now it was my turn to ask, Ronan. Who is Ahayute? If my theory is correct, then this seems to be secret information within the Claudia Nebula, so how come you know such confidential level information? As the examiner of this case, I had to find out more clearly. Could you please answer my question, Ronan?" Ronan slowly swallowed his saliva, tried to stay calm, then replied, "Actually, I don't know much. Because I only heard it by chance," but Karaka continuously expressed doubts at his answer. "By chance?" "That's right, you probably know, I was the first person to discover what happened in Grand Cappadocia. At that time, I overheard a few words they said from afar, that's all. At first I thought it wasn't anything important, so I stayed in one place, but now that I'm here, I have a hunch that it's an important clue. So I think I accidentally became too excited just now. I apologize for interrupting on my own like that." After saying that, he gently removed Karaka's hand from his shoulder. "Are you satisfied with this explanation?" Karaka still couldn't hide his suspicious eyes. Did he accidentally get the information? But I'm sure he's hiding something within this truth. But is that the reason I feel like this sword isn't pointed towards the Empire? Is it because of those eyes? What was boiling in his eyes was? Is it willpower, guilt or determination, or anger towards those bastards? Nabos quickly pulled out the sword in his hand, pointed it towards Karaka's neck and coldly warned, "You can stop now, Karaka. Don't tell me you're interrogating my disciples right now, right in front of me." Karaka quickly explained, "Of course not, previous swordsant, I just want to confirm. It's better to be careful." Immediately after that, he bowed his head and apologized to Ronan. "I was too rude, Ronan." He saw that and was so confused that he kept scratching his head. "Oh, it's okay, luckily we have resolved the misunderstanding. But I couldn't hide the insecurity in my heart. It was too dangerous. If I said the wrong thing, this old man would still plan to torture me. But unfortunately, he lost his eyesight. This kid is harder to catch than most phantom species." Ronan pointed at it and asked in bewilderment, "Phantom species, is this eye monster that strong?" "Of course, if you look closely, it's also very cute. Do you want to try touching it?" But as soon as he turned to look, he suddenly became afraid. That look. Why has the great eye changed? What's going on? It absorbed the curse, but from whom? It didn't even come close to the Cyrilla. Karaka rolled his eyes and looked at Ronan with suspicion. Could it be? Shouldn't I put it on his shoulder for a while to cast a mana shield, even if it's just for that short period of time? "Mr. Ronan, what's wrong, Mr. Karaka? Please excuse me for a moment." When Ronan saw him place his eyes on his hand, he immediately showed a disgusted look. "Wait, why did you suddenly do that?" The eye quickly clung tightly to his hand, then emitted blue light. Its eyes widened like an Edion. Then it immediately exploded. Ronan was so frightened that he couldn't speak. What was going on? Why did it explode on its own? Karaka felt that this was a bit strange, to the point that he couldn't stand it. How could this be possible? "Don't be surprised. Listen to me, it seems there's a curse on you," Ronan suddenly asked. "What? What did he suddenly say?" Karaka nodded slightly. "Have you ever felt constrained when performing certain actions? For example, he can't jump high or lift objects made of iron, something that unlike everyone else, he alone can't do." Ronan stood there stunned, as if he had been told something that had hit him right in the heart. Nabos saw his appearance and immediately recognized it. It seemed like it was there. "If you want to hide it, I won't inquire further, anyway I can't solve it. But you should know this, given the power of the curse." I may not know who the cursor is, but his malice towards you is great. After everything was finished, Karaka quickly sent the two of them away. They had worked hard until this late. We'll pay attention to the seal when we further investigate the Cirilla, but since it's already a powerful curse to begin with, it'll take quite a bit of time. Nabos nodded slightly. Okay, if you find out anything, just let me know. Before they left, Karaka glanced at Ronan as if he wanted to give more advice. Looks like you're thinking about a lot of things, Ronan. Ronan hesitantly replied, yes, a little, because I just discovered that the body that has accompanied me since birth has a curse. Karaka continued to reassure him, I understand. But don't worry too much. Aren't you a student at Filon? What do you mean? As far as I know, she's been there for a while. Magicians are considered the best at curses on this continent. Professor Maya's secret. The palanquin was floating in the night sky. Everything around was quiet. Suddenly Ronan sitting in the carriage rubbed his eyes and said, what the hell? He rubbed it and then cried out. He didn't know what was wrong. Professor Nabos sat next to him, crossed his arms, raised his eyebrows and asked, can't you sit still? Is it that itchy? Ronan opened his eyes and replied, yes, I've been like that all along. He remembered what happened earlier and began to tell. Ever since the eyeball monster touched me, my eyes kept tingling. Ronan was a little worried and asked, is it okay? Professor Nabos sighed helplessly and said, that's a sign that the curse is weakening, don't worry. Pausing for a moment, she asked again, do you know who the person who cast that curse on you is? Ronan answered honestly, yes, I can't figure it out even after thinking about it. Remembering the students at school who bullied him all the time, Ronan immediately said, those who were mean to me. I thought I lived a very honest life, enough that no one wanted to harm me, but now. Ronan hesitated for a long time before continuing to speak. He didn't know anything. Professor Nabos heard this and could only stay silent, not knowing what else to say. Suddenly Ronan seemed to remember something and shouted, oh yes, thank you for stopping old Rodlan for me. He remembered Rodolan's eyes looking at him. He said with some trepidation, his eyes looking at him at that time were extremely cruel. Thinking back at that time, it was fortunate that Professor Nabos arrived in time. He was extremely moved and said, if it weren't for her intervention, I felt like he was about to force me to confess to something I didn't do. Next to Professor Nabos, he rested his chin in his hand and sighed, I'm just fulfilling my responsibilities as a professor, so you don't need to thank me. Ronan glanced at Professor Nabos and thought to himself, not only is she talented, she is also a good person. As expected, the more I look at her, the more I believe she is a good person. But I still felt a bit strange. Ronan's eyes suddenly became a little colder. Outside the carriage was still flying fast. Inside Ronan thought, why have I never met her in my previous life, even on the battlefield? Ronan immediately remembered Klagia, then suspected that Professor Nabos might have something to do with the Klagia Nebula. The carriage outside was still flying steadily, but in Ronan's heart there was still an indescribable worry. Countless answers appeared in his mind about Professor Nabos' background. The next day, on the school grounds. Near that forest is the special practice space for the magic department, Shri Forest. At the entrance, Ronan and Professor Nabos had just arrived. Adishan saw this from afar and happily shouted, welcoming Ronan, long time no see. Adishan was extremely welcoming to Ronan. She smiled and said, if it weren't for the professor's request, it would be a long time before I get to see you. Are you still well? Seeing Adishan's entire body radiate with light, Ronan fell into deep thought and responded a few times, oh, just to be polite. In Ronan's mind, he remembered the past life. He was still entangled with the matter of the commander-in-chief. He turned his head away and tousled his hair, thinking, what should I do? I still don't know how to organize my thoughts about this. Adishan was extremely confused when he saw this scene. Scratching his head for a while, Ronan firmly said, let it go, smile. Then he turned around and smiled at Adishan, saying hello, yes, long time no see, senior. Ronan shyly raised her hand and said, are you living well? Adishan was a bit surprised when she heard this question. She quickly replied, well, after that day those who were afraid of Carden made friends with me, so everything is also much simpler. Adishan immediately remembered the previous times he had met Carden and said, I was a little concerned about something. Every time Carden saw my face I was scared. In Adishan's memory, she was holding Karen's broken spear and asking. Carden said briefly, your spear? Carden was startled when he heard that and quickly waved his hand and said, long spear, I use long spear, sorry. She showed an embarrassed face as she looked at Ronan and said, even though it sounded bad, it wasn't that bad. Right next to Ronan she was sweating. Chatting a few words, the two started going inside. Adishan asked as he walked, heard the professor say you had to break some curse? Ronan answered honestly, yes, I was somehow involved. Curse, now it's like that. Ronan glanced around before continuing to speak. That's why I came here tonight to meet the professor named Secret. Seeing so many huge stone pillars in front of her eyes, Ronan exclaimed, she didn't expect to have to go through this strange place. Her hobby is so strange. Adishan smiled and agreed with Ronan's thoughts. She said, yes, the office design is extremely unique. Unless you are a magic student you will not be able to find the way. Adishan continued, so I asked a senior who studied magic and was close to me to show me the way. Not paying attention to a figure appearing in front of him, Adishan looked around and said, but she hasn't arrived yet. At this moment, that shadow quickly rushed towards Adishan's body and happily shouted, I miss you so much Adishan. Adishan was quite surprised and happily called out, Eri. Ronan stood next to him with a blank face as if thinking about something. Next to him Adishan spoke again, it's been a long time since I've seen you. How have you been? Eri heard that and said coyly, it's okay, I'm fine. Ronan looked at Eri's face, searched through his memories and realized that this girl must have been the one who bragged about the beasts and sheep before. Looking at the extremely radiant and smiling face before his eyes, Ronan thought to himself, that is Akalusia. Seeing Eri holding her hand to her face, Adishan spoke, sorry for suddenly calling you, Eri, it's urgent. Eri looked at Adishan and said dearly, it's okay, call me anytime. I'm ready to fly right away. Pausing for a moment, Eri asked suspiciously, but why did she look for the professor? Before she could finish her sentence, Eri noticed Ronan behind her. She seemed to understand the problem and continued her unfinished sentence. Secret. Looking at Ronan standing in front of her, Eri was speechless. Ronan was so nervous that he was sweating. Eri immediately opened her eyes wide to see Ronan more clearly. Seeing clearly, she immediately froze on the spot. Seeing that the atmosphere seemed strange, Ronan spoke first to ease his embarrassment. He said, I asked her, hello Muzerzabet, no Eri is right. Who would have thought that at this moment, Eri suddenly grabbed her head and screamed angrily. She couldn't believe her eyes and said, why are you here? After accepting the fact that Ronan was here, Eri had no choice but to take him to find Professor Secret. Eri walked in front and led the way. She pushed aside the fallen tree branches on both sides, revealing a wooden house. When Ronan saw it, he immediately said, this is really. Looking at the house hidden in the forest before his eyes, Ronan found it difficult to finish the unfinished words, Professor's office. He completely did not believe that this was a professor's office, so he turned to look at Eri and said, a bit suspicious, are you planning on sending me to my grave here, Eri? Ronan continued to talk, paying the price because I saw something I shouldn't have seen. Eri got angry when she heard that, glared at him and said, don't call me that, besides, who wants to kill you? Eri was angry, stamped her feet angrily, walked ahead and said, just be quiet and follow me. Ronan followed behind and leisurely put his arm around his neck and said, look at your attitude. Looking at Eri walking angrily in front, Ronan thought to himself, unexpectedly, who knew that this girl was close to the commander-in-chief? He remembered Eri's previous image, she was originally Akalusia, did the two of them have any connection? At this time, both of them went to the front of the office door, and Eri took out the lock. After opening the door, the two walked inside. Seeing an old woman sitting inside the room, Ronan hesitantly asked, who is she? As if he had determined that the kind old woman in front of him was the person he was looking for, without needing an answer, he immediately said with certainty, is it Professor Secret? At that time, Eri spoke up, don't get excited yet, we still have to go through one more level. Hearing that, Ronan was extremely confused. Without saying much more, the two immediately walked closer to Professor Secret. Eri opened her eyes wide and stared at Professor Secret. Then she raised her hand to use magic, reminding Ronan that, I tell you in advance, from now on no matter what happens here. Eri used magic while continuing to speak, you also have to stand still and not interfere, understand? Hearing that, Ronan did not dare to argue so he nodded and replied, okay. Received the answer. At this moment Eri opened her mouth to mumble, Cassipa Lunazir Delpharim. Then her eyes opened wide and she shouted an open word. A huge stream of magic immediately spread out around the room. Ronan looked at Professor Secret who was still sitting motionless in his chair, feeling extremely confused. Looking at the old face in front of him, Ronan thought to himself, what's going on? Has something happened yet? Suddenly, Professor Secret opened his mouth. Both Professor Secret's face and huge teeth were gaping in front of Ronan and Eri. Ronan saw such a scene for the first time and said in panic, what is that? Eri next to him was extremely calm. She reassured in a low voice, no need to worry. After a while, another room appeared. Eri immediately said, this is Professor Sarashio's real office. Looking at the more splendid room containing many books in front of him, Ronan asked suspiciously, this is the office. With countless questions in his heart, he continued to ask, what was the gate just now? I mean it's just weird. Ronan was talking to Eri, then a girl appeared behind him, the girl spoke, it turned out to be him. Professor Secret really appeared on high. She looked at Ronan and said, "The student sent by Nabos, he is exactly what I thought." Hearing these words, Ronan quickly turned around to look. At the same time, Professor Secret quickly flew towards him, raised Ronan's eyes with his hand, making him stunned for a moment. Professor Secret was still floating, looking into Ronan's eyes as he spoke. "I felt something extremely evil." Hearing this sentence, Ronan secretly thought, "This is the most talented curse caster in the continent." Mayan Secret, special properties. Professor Secret checked for a while and then said, "What an interesting kid." Looking at the still young professor in front of him, Ronan thought in confusion, "Is she 83 years old?" A young girl suddenly rushed forward from nowhere and used 2 fingers to open Ronan's eyes. Ronan looked at the girl in front of him in horror, thinking, "What is this? Could this kid be Professor Secret?" The girl in front of her seemed to read Ronan's thoughts, curled her mouth and said, "No need to be so surprised." Retracting her hand, she smiled and said, "That's who I am. I look like this but I'm over 80 years old." Ronan immediately asked in doubt, 80, isn't that just 8 years old? Ronan continued to speak his mind. Looking younger than his age also has limitations. Why Professor? As soon as he said this, Professor Secret immediately interrupted him. "Let's talk about that later. Now." Stopping for a moment, she raised her hand high and flicked it. Ronan's body was immediately covered with a layer of bright and colorful spells. Professor Secret continued to say that it was more important to remove the curse for him. Ronan looked around and exclaimed in shock, "What is this?" Professor Secret didn't answer. She held her chin in thought and said, she didn't expect that his body didn't have a curse like this, even an almost original ancient curse. It's really dangerous. After looking at these incantations for a while, Professor Secret continued to say that with normal skills, he couldn't even touch it. Hearing that, Ronan worriedly exclaimed, so it can't be solved." Professor Secret slowly said with his hands behind his back, "Don't worry, there are actually more curses to solve than I thought." Looking at the inscriptions at Ronan's feet, Professor Secret seemed thoughtful. After a moment, she smiled and said, "But of course, I had already prepared." Looking at the young man in front of him surrounded by so many spells, Professor Secret said seriously, "Listen Ronan, from now on, I will turn the curse into an object in the imaginary world of your consciousness." Imagining the image of Ronan being bound by many heavy iron chains symbolizing the curse he was suffering, Professor Secret's voice continued to echo. He only needed to do one thing, that is to find the root of the curse that is restraining him, and break it. Thinking about the image of himself finding the root of the curse, his eyes emitted a cold look, and he swung the sword in his hand. Ronan, sweating all over his face, pulled himself out of his thoughts and cautiously asked, "Professor, do you want me to break the root of the curse?" He clenched his fists and exclaimed incredulously, "How am I going to break this?" Professor Secret smiled and replied, "When you see it, you'll know." Then she put out a finger and pointed at Ronan's forehead. She smiled at him and said, "So, take care." From Professor Secret's fingertips suddenly emitted a dazzling stream of light, shooting straight at Ronan's head. Ronan's whole body was immediately pushed into another space. He thought to himself, so suddenly. Going through a dark tunnel, in front of Ronan who was now fluttering through a few leaves. Landing in a forest, he stretched out his hand and looked around, thinking, "This is an imaginary world drawn from the curse inside me." Ronan took a step forward, but suddenly his feet suddenly stopped. He turned his head slightly to look behind, his eyes wide open in surprise. In front of Ronan appeared a very familiar house. It was his house, he said doubtfully. Could it be that the source of the curse was his house or something? Saying this, a silky hair suddenly brushed Ronan's arm. What the hell is this? Ronan thought to himself. Suddenly his eyes opened wide in surprise. An extremely familiar young voice rang in his ears, "Mom, I'm home." A little girl wearing a light pink dress happily ran home from afar. "Isn't this your older sister?" Inside the house, my younger sister Iril was excitedly looking at a baby lying in a crib, her eyes sparkling and shouting, "Hee, so cute." Seeing the baby inside was sleeping soundly, Iril turned to ask her mother, "But, why is Ronan always sleeping like that? Am I sick, mother?" The mother heard that and smiled and said, "Babies have to sleep a lot to grow up, just like you, Iril." The mother was extremely beautiful and gentle looking at her 2 children. She narrowed her eyes and smiled, continuing to say, "If your younger brother gets sick in the future, as your older sister, you have to take good care of him." Hearing that, Iril immediately stood up, raised her hand and said, "Yes, I will protect Ronan forever. Always, because Ronan is my younger brother." Looking at the 2 people laughing and chatting happily in front of him, Ronan frowned and thought, no matter how I look at it, this is the scene at home, when I was just born. Iril is now clinging to the small cradle, looking intently at the baby. The mother is standing to the side, smiling gently. So the plump baby lying in the crib is me, Ronan thought. Thinking of this, he grimaced and shook his head and said, "No way, I was also a child. I thought I was this big as soon as I was born." Running to the railing, Ron clenched his hands and said worriedly, "So I'm seeing the past, but I don't remember anything. What should I do?" Push open the door of a room. Ronan's eyes suddenly opened wide in horror. He confusedly glanced around and looked around. His hands began to tremble violently. He thought to himself, his body wasn't moving. Looking at a tall figure in front of him, Ronan was alert, not understanding who this bastard was. But at this moment, Iril suddenly raised her tiny hands and happily shouted, "Wow, come back." The mother behind her also gently said, "Today, you came home so early." This figure said something he couldn't make out. The mother asked suspiciously, the baby is in the crib. You must be very curious to see Ronan's face, right?" The mother smiled and urged her to look away. The boy was exactly the same. As soon as she said this, the figure in front of her suddenly said something and then held out her hand, 2 fingers releasing a strange black aura. The hand raised in front of the mother's face was still saying something very difficult to understand. The mother saw this scene and said 2 dangerous words in confusion. Her eyes began to grow wild. She cautiously said, "What do you mean?" This figure said nothing but turned around. At his feet, the mother had fainted and fallen down. Iril stood to the side looking at her mother, her face screaming in fear. Ronan witnessed this scene. His face became extremely scary. He called out for mother, not understanding what was going on. The strange black aura was about to attack Iril, but the girl still didn't know anything. She asked in a low voice, why did her mother suddenly? The other figure raised his hand and hit Iril straight in the head. The girl also quickly fainted and fell to the floor. Ronan cried out in panic. Suddenly tears streamed down his face, his mouth opened wide and he screamed in anger. He lifted his foot and scolded loudly, "You bastard, what do you think you are doing?" But right at this moment, Ronan's eyes widened in horror. He looked at what had just appeared in the Black Shadow's hand. They were all the same incantations as the ones that came out of him just now. A blinding light emitted from the baby's crib. Ronan raised his hand to cover his face. His teeth clenched tightly together. His face showed an evil look. He frowned tightly and said, "Yes, it is you, the root of the curse, that I must break." 2 books suddenly fell hard to the floor. Looking at his shaking hand, Professor Secret said, "Despite careful preparation, my mana still hit rock bottom." She looked at Ronan's body lying below and exclaimed, "What a strange curse." Hearing these words, Eri in the back frowned and asked, "Even the professor said that, how many curses are there?" Professor Secret shook his head and said, "I'm not sure. Aside from the power curse, the number is probably around 10. As soon as she heard this number, Eri couldn't believe her ears and shouted, 10. "Oh my god, the professor has no other choice," Eri exclaimed. "If you want to neutralize 10 curses at the same time, then," having said this, Professor Eri immediately interrupted and replied, "No, I'm surprised by the truth. It has to be." The professor turned her head slightly. She clasped her hands behind her back and said with a serious look on her face, "The curse I am dealing with is only one.